For most of human history, food did not arrive in neat circles around a clock. It appeared, disappeared, spoiled, moved, failed, returned, and sometimes vanished for reasons no one could control. A body could not simply expect breakfast, lunch, and dinner because the world outside the body was never that obedient. Yet today, hunger is often measured by hours, by work breaks, by school bells, by kitchens that are always full. The strange thing is that the human body is ancient, but the 3-meal day is not. So what happens when an old body is asked to live inside a new schedule? Why humans didn't evolve to eat 3 meals a day? Long before hunger was counted by hours, it was answered by the world. A human body did not wake beneath a roof and move toward a table because a morning meal was waiting. It woke inside weather, inside darkness or light, inside the slow uncertainty of land, water, plants, animals, fire, and other people. The stomach could feel empty, but emptiness did not create food. The day could begin, but the beginning of a day did not promise a meal. This is one of the quiet distances between the modern body and the deep history it still carries. Today, a person may look at a clock and decide that it is time to eat, even before true hunger has fully arrived. Morning becomes breakfast. Midday becomes lunch. Evening becomes dinner. The pattern feels so ordinary that it can seem almost natural, as if the body itself had been shaped around 3 fixed openings in the day. But the older story of human life does not begin with fixed openings. It begins with movement, waiting, searching, sharing, failing, trying again, and living through stretches of time when food could not be commanded simply because the body wanted it. This does not mean ancient people were always starving, and it does not mean their lives were only hardship. That would be too simple, and probably wrong. Human communities learned landscapes with care. They knew seasons, animal paths, edible plants, water sources, and the signs of change in the air and ground. But even with knowledge, food was not arranged like appointments. It came through contact with the environment, and the environment did not divide itself into breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The human body, from its beginning, had to exist in this unevenness. It needed to use energy when food was not immediately present. It needed to keep moving after a missed chance. It needed to remain alive through delay. It needed to be social enough to share, observant enough to notice, and flexible enough not to collapse when the day did not unfold in a predictable order. This is why the modern 3-meal rhythm can feel so obvious and yet be historically strange. The rhythm belongs not only to hunger but to houses, clocks, work schedules, stored food, kitchens, roads, markets, schools, and systems of time. Those things are powerful, but they are late arrivals in the long story of our species. The body is older than the meal schedule. Its basic needs come from a time when eating was tied to opportunity rather than routine. A fruiting tree did not appear because it was morning. A carcass, a gathered root, a caught fish, a patch of seeds, or a successful hunt did not obey noon. A group might eat when food was found, prepare it when fire and safety allowed, carry it when possible, or save it only under certain conditions. Across different environments, people would have lived in many different ways, and science cannot honestly reduce all of prehistory into one simple daily menu. But the broad point is safer and clearer. The world that shaped the human body was not a world of 3 guaranteed meals. It was a world where food had timing of its own. This matters because the title question is not really asking whether 3 meals can fit into modern life. For many people, they can. The deeper question is whether this rhythm is an ancient biological design written into the body from the beginning. When we slow down and look back, the answer becomes less like a rule and more like a historical tension. The body learned hunger before it learned clocks. It learned energy before it learned schedules. It learned to live with intervals before it lived with menus. And somewhere between that old flexibility and the modern table, a quiet mismatch began to form. Not a disaster, not a simple mistake, but a reminder that the body we feed today first came from a world where food arrived on the terms of nature, not on the terms of time. To understand why the 3-meal day is so recent, it helps to notice how much of modern eating depends on things that are not inside the body at all. A clock on the wall, a lunch break at work, a school timetable, a kitchen filled with stored food. a refrigerator humming quietly through the night, a shop that opens at a regular hour, a road that brings food from somewhere far away. These things feel ordinary now, but they are not ancient parts of human biology. They are arrangements built around settled life, labour, storage, trade, and timekeeping. The body can adapt to such arrangements, but adapting to a schedule is not the same as being created for it. Deep in human history, hunger would have been more connected to circumstance than to the hour. A person could wake hungry, but the body's signal did not guarantee an immediate answer. The land still had to be searched. The group still had to move or wait. Weather could slow everything down. Darkness could make travel unsafe. Firewood might have to be gathered. Food might have to be cleaned, cracked, cooked, shared, or carried. Even when food was available, eating was not necessarily separated into the clean modern categories of morning, midday, and evening. The older rhythm was probably more elastic, more shaped by place, and more dependent on what could actually be obtained. We have to speak carefully here, because no one can look across all of prehistory and say that humans ate in one exact pattern. Human life spread across forests, coastlines, grasslands, deserts, river valleys, cold regions, warm regions, wet seasons, dry seasons, and thousands of local conditions. Different groups would have made different choices. Some places may have offered food more steadily, other places may have forced longer gaps. Some communities may have eaten small amounts when they could. Others may have shared larger meals after a successful gathering or hunt. But this variety is exactly the point. The human body did not come from one universal dining schedule. It came from many landscapes, many uncertainties, and many ways of turning the outside world into energy. A fixed 3-meal structure would have required a level of predictability that most early environments could not promise every day. There is a quiet lesson in that. The body's hunger signals are real, but they are not the same thing as a clock. Hunger can rise and fall. It can sharpen with habit. It can be shaped by smells, by routines, by social cues, by memory, by what the body has come to expect. In modern life, when breakfast is always at a certain hour, the body may begin to prepare for food at that hour. When lunch arrives during a work break, hunger may seem to gather around that pause. When dinner becomes the main family meal, appetite may become tied to evening light, homecoming, and rest. None of this means the body is broken. It means the body is responsive. It learns the world around it. But the world around it today is very different from the world in which human hunger first became part of survival. The deeper origin of the human body is not a dining room, but a landscape, not a menu, but a search, not a clock, but changing light, changing weather, and changing opportunity. This is why the idea of 3 meals can be both useful and misleading at the same time. Useful because modern life often needs structure. Misleading because structure can begin to look like nature when it has been repeated long enough. After many years of eating at set times, it becomes easy to feel that those times are written into the body itself. Yet history suggests something softer and more complicated. The body can live inside a schedule, but it did not begin there. It began in a world where the day was not divided by plates, and where the first question was not what time it was, but whether the land, the group, and the season could offer something that day. That older hunger has not disappeared completely. It remains beneath the modern routine, quiet and patient, reminding us that before humans organized meals, they first had to learn how to wait. The modern day often teaches the body to expect food before the body has truly asked for it. A person rises, and breakfast seems to belong to the morning. The sun climbs, and lunch seems to belong to the middle of work. Evening arrives, and dinner seems to belong to home, rest, and the closing of the day. After years of repetition, these moments can feel as if they are older than culture, older than cities, older than farming, almost as old as hunger itself. But the deeper human story moves in the opposite direction. Hunger is ancient. The fixed meal is younger, the clock is younger still, and the idea that a normal human day should be divided into 3 expected acts of eating is not the first rhythm the body knew. The first rhythm was more likely the rhythm of change, light and dark, warmth and cold, abundance and scarcity, movement and rest, search and return. This does not make the 3-meal pattern false or useless. It only places it in history. A modern schedule can help people organize work, family, medicine, school, and care. It can give shape to the day. It can make life easier in societies where many people must move together through the same hours. But when we ask why humans did not evolve to eat 3 meals a day, we are asking about origins, not convenience. We are asking whether the body was shaped by a world where food appeared at predictable social times. And that world for most of human existence was not there. Before farms, before stored grain in large quantities, before towns, before wages, before school bells, before factory shifts, before the ordinary kitchen shelf, food was tied to direct contact with the living landscape. The body's needs were constant in one sense, because every body needed energy, water, and repair. But the answers to those needs were uneven. A useful plant could be seasonal. An animal could move away. A shoreline could offer food at one time and danger at another. A dry period could change what was available. A cold period could narrow choices. A group might find enough, more than enough, or not enough, and the timing of eating would follow those conditions rather than an abstract plan. This is why the old human body had to be more than a simple appetite machine. It had to manage delay. It had to draw on stored energy. It had to keep attention alive even when the stomach was not full. It had to connect hunger with memory, with social cooperation, with the learned map of a place. Hunger was not only a private feeling inside one person, it was also a signal that linked the body to the land and to other bodies. When food came, it could become a moment of sharing, preparation, watching, guarding, cooking, or resting. When food did not come, the body still had to continue. In that older setting, the question was rarely whether a person had completed the correct number of meals. The question was whether life could be sustained through the day, the season, and the uncertain stretch ahead. Modern life has softened many of these edges, at least for people with stable access to food. It has made eating less dependent on immediate weather, local plants, animal movement, or the success of a search. A person can eat because the hour has arrived, not because the landscape has offered something. This is a remarkable achievement, but it can also hide the age of the body beneath the newness of the routine. The body sits at a table, but its history began outside the table. The body hears the lunch bell, but its deeper systems were formed before bells. The body may expect dinner, but expectation itself has been trained by repetition. Underneath that training, there remains an older capacity to live with intervals, to respond to changing supply, to let hunger rise without always treating it as an emergency, and to connect eating with context rather than clockwork. This older capacity should not be turned into a rule or a health command. It is not a reason to copy an imagined past, because the past was varied, difficult, and not always knowable. It is simply a way to see the present more honestly. 3 meals a day may be familiar, practical, and deeply woven into modern life, but familiarity is not the same as origin. The human body carries a longer memory than the modern timetable, and the first doorway into this story is simple. Before humans learned to arrange the day around meals, they had to survive in a world where meals had not yet been arranged. Before people could think of meals, they had to think of possibility. A day did not open with a guaranteed portion of food, waiting in a familiar place, protected from weather and decay. It opened with an older question. What can be found? What can be reached? What can be safely taken? And what must be left alone? The answer was never the same everywhere. Human beings did not begin in one single landscape with one single pattern of eating. They spread through changing regions, across warm places and cold places, near rivers, forests, grasslands, coasts, caves, open plains, and many mixed environments where each season could alter what the body could expect. That variety matters. If we imagine one simple prehistoric menu or one simple daily routine, we make the past too small. The safer truth is that early human food was tied to opportunity, and opportunity was uneven. A group might know where certain plants grew, but those plants could be seasonal. They might know where animals moved, but animals did not stay still for human hunger. They might collect shellfish, nuts, tubers, fruits, eggs, insects, honey, or small animals in some environments. But not all of these foods were available everywhere, and not all could be gathered without risk. The body therefore lived in a world where eating was connected to attention. Eyes had to notice traces. Hands had to test, carry, dig, crack, scrape, cut, or share. Feet had to travel. Memory had to hold the shape of a place. In such a world, food was part of a relationship between the body, the group, and the land. This is why the idea of 3 meals a day feels too smooth when placed beside early human life. 3 meals require more than hunger. They require predictable access. They require food that can be stored, protected, divided, and expected at similar times. They require a day shaped by social order, not only by sunlight and movement. Before that level of organization became common, eating was more likely to bend around what the environment allowed. If food appeared in the morning, people could eat in the morning. If food was found later, the body had to wait. If there was more than could be eaten at once, the group might share, process, carry, dry, smoke, cook, or keep it only when conditions and knowledge made that possible. If there was little, the day did not become 3 smaller meals by magic. It became a day of searching, conserving, moving, or relying on what had been eaten before. None of this should be turned into a romantic picture of constant freedom or a dark picture of constant starvation. Both would be misleading. Human beings survived because they were adaptable, social, observant, and able to learn from place to place. Many environments could offer real abundance at certain times, but abundance is not the same as a schedule. A fruiting season, a successful hunt, a rich shoreline, or a patch of edible roots can feed people well, yet still refuse to behave like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The human body did not need the world to be perfectly regular in order to live. It needed ways to handle irregularity. It needed stored energy. It needed appetite that could respond when food was present. It needed patience when food was absent. It needed social bonds, because one person's success could matter to others, and one person's failure might not end the day if the group could share. This older pattern brings us closer to the beginning of the title question. Humans did not evolve inside a cafeteria of fixed hours. They evolved inside living systems that shifted. The land had rhythms, but those rhythms were not the same as a modern timetable. Seasons turned, animals migrated, plants flowered and withered, water rose and fell, but none of these movements divided the day into 3 dependable plates. Before meals became a structure, food was an encounter. Before eating became routine, it was a response. And before the body learned the habits of modern time, it first learned to keep going in a world where opportunity could arrive early, late, or not at all. The older human day was not empty, and it was not simple. It was filled with decisions that modern eating can easily hide. A person looking for food had to judge distance, risk, weather, effort, and return. A plant might be edible, but only in one season, or only after careful preparation. A nut might be rich in energy, but protected by a hard shell. A root might be hidden beneath the ground and require digging. A shoreline might offer shellfish or fish, but only when tides, tools, skill, and safety allowed. Animal foods, when available, could be valuable, but animals were not waiting to become food. They moved, scattered, hid, defended themselves, or disappeared into landscapes wider than human control. Even when early humans understood their surroundings well, knowledge did not erase uncertainty. It only gave the body and the group a better way to meet it. This is one reason the idea of 3 fixed meals feels too narrow for the deeper story. A meal schedule assumes that the main question has already been solved. It assumes that food exists nearby, that it can be reached without much risk, that it can be prepared at a chosen hour, and that the day can be divided before the food is even found. But in the older world, the division often had to come after the encounter. A group could not always decide first and eat later according to a clean plan. The land had to answer in some way. Sometimes it answered with plenty. Sometimes it answered with little. Sometimes it answered only after movement, waiting, and repeated attention. The body had to live between these answers. This does not mean early humans were passive victims of nature. They were not simply wandering without memory. Human survival depended on learning. A remembered water source, a seasonal plant, a migration path, a safe place to rest, a better stone edge, a useful fire, a shared warning, or the knowledge of what not to eat could change everything. Over many generations, These forms of knowledge became part of how groups lived in particular places. Still, knowledge worked within limits. It could guide people toward opportunity, but it could not make every day equal. It could not force fruit to ripen early, bring rain to dry ground, or hold animals in one place. This is the careful balance we need for a truthful story. The human past was neither a constant feast nor a constant famine. It was a shifting field of possibility. In that field, the body could not be built only for perfect regularity. It needed to tolerate gaps, respond to abundance, and adjust to the uneven pattern of the world. This may be one of the oldest differences between hunger and mealtime. Hunger is a signal from the body. Mealtime is an agreement made by a society. Hunger can appear when the stomach is empty, when energy is expected, when habit has trained the body, or when memory and smell begin to prepare digestion. Mealtime, by contrast, needs order around the body. It needs shared expectations. It needs people to agree that a certain hour belongs to eating. Before that agreement became strong, food was more likely to shape the hour than the hour was to shape the food. A successful gathering could turn a moment into eating. A long search could delay it. A dangerous place could postpone it. A shared find could bring people together before the day had any name for breakfast or lunch. When we bring this back to the beginning of human life, the title question becomes clearer without becoming too simple. Humans did not fail to evolve for 3 meals because the body was poorly designed. The body was shaped by a different problem. It had to survive in a world where energy was necessary, but access to energy was not always smooth. It had to keep the mind alert enough to search, the muscles ready enough to move, and the social bonds strong enough to make one person's luck matter beyond one person. 3 meals a day belong to a world where time has been organized around food. The older body belongs to a world where food organized time. And in that reversal we can begin to hear the ancient rhythm beneath the modern one. Not a rhythm of plates placed neatly across the day, but a rhythm of opportunity, patience, effort, and return. A useful way to imagine the older human day is not as a line divided into meals, but as a field of changing chances. Some chances were small and close. Others were distant, risky, or uncertain. A handful of gathered food could matter. A better patch of plants could change the day. A trace of animal movement could pull attention toward a different place. A storm could close a path. Heat could slow the body. Cold could demand more energy. Children, elders, injury, illness, and the needs of the group could all change how far people moved and when they ate. In a world like that, food was not only a biological need, it was a question of timing, place, memory, cooperation, and restraint. The body could not simply announce hunger and expect the world to obey. It had to wait for the world to become possible. This is why a 3-meal pattern, when projected too far backward, can quietly distort the past. It makes food seem as if it was already arranged and only needed to be consumed. But for much of human history, the work came before the arrangement. People had to find, recognize, collect, process, protect, cook, divide, and sometimes carry food before it could become anything like a meal. Even the word meal can be misleading if we imagine it as a neat plate at a fixed hour. Eating may have happened in smaller moments, shared moments, delayed moments, or larger moments after a successful effort. Some foods may have been eaten soon after discovery. Others may have required preparation. Some could be saved, others could not. The pattern would have changed with climate, landscape, tools, knowledge, and the life of the group. This variety is not a weakness in the story. It is the story. Human beings survived because they were not locked into one rigid feeding rhythm. They could live through days that did not look the same. They could respond when food was present and continue when it was not. They could use social life to soften uncertainty, because a group can spread risk in ways a single body cannot. One person might find something. Another might remember where to look. Another might watch for danger. Hunger, in this sense, was never only private. It was woven into the shared life of people trying to remain alive together. That shared life still did not require 3 equal meals. It required attention to what the day actually offered. The modern table often hides this older truth because it separates food from the place it came from. A person may open a cabinet and see abundance without seeing seasons. A person may eat at noon because the schedule says noon, not because anything in the landscape has changed. This is a powerful form of security, and it should not be dismissed. Modern food systems, at their best, protect people from many old uncertainties, but they also make it easy to mistake a social achievement for an ancient biological rule. The body that sits down for lunch still belongs to a species that spent a far longer time meeting food through landscape, labor, and uncertainty. It carries systems that can respond to habit, but those systems did not begin with habit alone. They began with survival in variable conditions. So when we ask why humans did not evolve to eat 3 meals a day, one careful answer is that evolution did not need to build a body for a schedule that did not yet exist. It needed to shape a body that could manage changing access to energy. It needed a body that could store, spend, recover, search, and cooperate. It needed a body that could treat food as opportunity before it treated food as routine. Before breakfast, lunch, and dinner could feel normal, there had to be houses, storage, fields, markets, clocks, work days, and shared expectations about time. Before all of that, there was hunger moving through a living world. And in that world, the most important question was not how many times the body should eat, but how the body could keep going until food became possible again. The body that came out of the older world could not be fragile in only one direction. It could not depend on food appearing at the first sign of hunger, because hunger and food did not always arrive together. It could not shut down every time the stomach was empty. It could not treat delay as failure. Instead, the human body had to become flexible. This flexibility does not mean the body was free from need. Every human body needed energy. Every human body had limits, but those limits were not arranged around 3 exact meals. They were arranged around the harder task of continuing through change. A person might eat after finding food early in the day. Another day, the same person might move, wait, search, and eat later. At another time, food might come in a larger amount and be shared, prepared, or saved if conditions allowed. The body had to meet all of these possibilities without requiring the world to become perfectly regular. This is where the title question becomes more biological. Humans did not evolve to eat 3 meals a day because the body was not shaped inside a fixed timetable. It was shaped inside uncertainty. The ancient problem was not how to complete breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The ancient problem was how to keep enough energy available when food came unevenly. The body needed ways to store energy after eating, and ways to use that stored energy when eating was delayed. It needed hormones and signals that could help manage hunger, fullness, attention, and movement. It needed to balance immediate need with the possibility that food might arrive later. After effort, after walking, after searching, after cooperation. This is not a story of perfection. Evolution does not create perfect bodies. It creates workable bodies shaped by pressures, trade-offs, and survival across many generations. The human body is not a machine designed for one clean routine. It is more like an old landscape of overlapping systems, each one trying to keep life going when the outside world changes. Hunger is one of those systems. It is powerful, but it is not a simple command. Hunger can rise when energy is low. It can also rise because the body has learned a pattern. It can be awakened by smell, memory, emotion, social setting, or the sight of food. Fullness, too, is not only the stretching of the stomach. It involves signals from digestion, nutrients, habit, and expectation. The body listens to many messages at once, and these messages do not all speak with the same volume. In the deep past, this complexity would have been useful because eating itself was complex. Food could be scarce, abundant, delayed, shared, difficult to process, or suddenly available. A rigid body, one that required food at identical hours every day, would have been poorly matched to a changing world. A flexible body had more room to survive. It could use what had been eaten before. It could continue moving when the next food source was not yet reached. It could respond strongly when food finally appeared. It could learn the rhythms of a place without being trapped by one narrow schedule. That does not mean modern people should ignore hunger, or force the body into hardship, or copy an imagined prehistoric life. The point is not advice. The point is history. The body's flexibility was shaped long before modern meal culture gave names to the eating day. The body's signals are real, but they are older than the social structure that now surrounds them. When a person today feels hungry at noon, that feeling may be biological, but it may also be trained by years of eating at noon. When a person expects breakfast immediately after waking, that expectation may be comfortable and useful, but it is not proof that humans were built from the beginning for that exact pattern. The body can learn a schedule because it is responsive. It can prepare for familiar times. It can settle into routines that modern life repeats. But the ability to learn a routine is different from being born for only that routine. The older human body had to live with more than routine. It had to live with interruption. It had to live with waiting. It had to live with the uncertain distance between wanting food and finding food. And because of that, the first biological answer to the 3-meal question is not that the body rejected structure, but that it was shaped for something wider than structure, the quiet, difficult flexibility of staying alive when the world did not feed anyone by the clock. The body's flexibility begins with a simple fact: eating and using energy are not the same moment. Food enters the mouth at one time, but the body must keep living long after that moment has passed. It must breathe, think, walk, repair tissue, keep warm, move blood, protect the brain, and maintain attention even when no new food is arriving. This is true today, and it would have been even more important in the older human world, where access to food could change with place, weather, season, skill, and luck. If the body could only function immediately after eating, human life would have been far too brittle. A missed chance would have become a crisis. A delayed search would have become impossible. A long walk between food sources would have ended before it began. Instead, the body carries ways to bridge the space between meals, and that space is older than the meal itself. After food is eaten, some energy can be used soon, some can be stored. Later, when eating pauses, the body can draw on what was stored and shift how it uses fuel. This does not make hunger meaningless. Hunger is still a serious signal, but it shows that the body is not simply built for constant intake. It is built around movement between intake and use, between storing and spending, between receiving food and continuing without it. In modern life, 3 meals can make these shifts feel invisible. Breakfast arrives before the body has to search. Lunch appears because the workday allows it. Dinner comes from a kitchen, a market, a delivery, a refrigerator, or a system of supply that stretches far beyond what the eye can see. But beneath that smooth surface, the body still works with older tools. It still manages energy across time. It still responds to patterns. It still senses when food is expected, and it still knows how to continue for a while when food is not immediately present. This is why the modern schedule can train hunger without proving that the schedule is ancient. If someone eats every day at the same hour, the body may begin to prepare for that hour. Appetite may rise. Saliva may increase. Attention may turn toward food. The stomach may seem to speak with the voice of the clock, but the clock is not the origin of hunger. It is one of the many signals the body can learn. In the beginning of human life, the signals would have been different. The sight of edible plants, the smell of cooking, the return of others carrying food, the season when certain foods became available, the memory of a place where something had once been found. These cues were not abstract. They were tied to survival. They connected the inside of the body to the outside world. A flexible body could listen to those cues and adjust. It could become hungry when opportunity appeared. It could become alert when food might be found. It could continue through delay without needing to believe that the day was broken. This flexibility also explains why it is too simple to say that humans were designed for either constant eating or long fasting as a single rule. The past was not one clean diet system. It was many human groups, many environments, many seasons, and many changing pressures. Some days may have brought frequent small foods. Some days may have brought a larger shared meal. Some days may have brought waiting. Some places may have offered steady resources for part of the year. Other places may have demanded more movement and more uncertainty. The body that survived such variety could not be locked into one exact number of meals. It needed range. It needed the ability to respond to different amounts of food at different times. It needed to handle both fullness and absence without turning either one into a permanent condition. In that sense, the body is not a strict clock, but neither is it chaos. It has rhythms, but those rhythms are living rhythms. They can bend with light, sleep, labor, memory, stress, social life, and repeated habits. Modern culture often takes one possible rhythm and treats it as the normal human day: morning food, midday food, evening food. For many people, that structure may be practical, comforting, and socially useful, but practicality should not be mistaken for deep origin. The deeper origin is the body's ability to cross intervals. The older story is not that humans were meant to ignore hunger, but that hunger belonged to a wider system of survival. It told the body something important, but it did not always receive an immediate answer from the world. Between the signal and the answer, the body had to continue. That space between wanting and receiving may be one of the quiet places where human evolution did some of its most important work. It shaped a creature that could search while hungry, remember while uncertain, share when food appeared, and rest when enough had been found. The 3-meal day narrows that ancient range into a social pattern. The body can live inside that pattern, often very comfortably, but under the pattern remains the older design of flexibility, the design of a body that learned not only how to eat, but how to wait, how to use what came before, and how to keep going until the world offered food again. A flexible body is not a body without rhythm. It is a body whose rhythms can answer the world around it. This is an important difference, because modern life often turns rhythm into schedule. A schedule says that food belongs to a certain hour. A deeper biological rhythm says that the body watches, remembers, prepares, adjusts, and responds. The human body has always needed some order inside itself. Sleep and waking, warmth and cooling, activity and rest, hunger and fullness all move through patterns. But these patterns are not the same as 3 fixed meals placed neatly into every day. They are older, wider, and more sensitive to context. The body can learn that food usually comes in the morning, or at noon, or after work. It can begin to expect those times. Yet this ability to expect is itself a sign of flexibility, not proof of an ancient 3-meal design. A body that can learn breakfast is also a body that once had to learn berries in one season, shellfish at one tide, roots in one patch of ground, animal movement after rain, or the smell of cooking when a group returned with food. In each case, hunger was not alone. It was tied to memory, place, and repeated experience. This is why the biology of hunger should be treated carefully. It is tempting to turn it into a simple story. Some people may say the body needs constant food. Others may say the body was made for long gaps, but the older human story does not fit neatly into either extreme. Across deep time, people lived in many environments. Some places may have allowed frequent eating when small foods were easy to gather. Other places may have created longer intervals, especially when food required travel, cooperation, tools, or luck. The body did not need one perfect rule for all of these worlds. It needed range. It needed the capacity to use food when it was present and to continue when it was delayed. It needed to become hungry without becoming helpless. It needed to become full without assuming that fullness would return at the same hour tomorrow. That range may be one of the quiet reasons humans could spread so widely. A creature locked to a narrow feeding schedule would be tied to a narrow kind of place. Human beings were not like that. They learned coasts, forests, open lands, rivers, cold edges, dry stretches, and changing seasons. They carried knowledge in groups, passed memory across generations, and used tools, fire, language, and cooperation to widen what food could mean. But even with these strengths, they were still living inside nature's timing. The body could not demand that a landscape divide itself into morning, noon, and evening portions. It had to accept unevenness and make life inside it. This does not make modern eating wrong. A regular eating pattern can be useful. It can support family life, work, school, care for children, care for elders, and the simple comfort of knowing when food will arrive. The danger is not the schedule itself. The danger is forgetting that the schedule is historical. Once we forget that, we may begin to mistake a modern arrangement for a biological law. We may imagine that hunger at a certain hour proves the body was always built around that hour, but a trained expectation is not the same thing as an origin. The body is capable of being trained because it is old, adaptive, and responsive. It can attach hunger to the clock because earlier bodies attached hunger to signs in the world. The clock is only a new sign. Under it, the same older capacity remains. By the end of this first biological step, the question becomes calmer and clearer. Humans did not evolve to eat 3 meals a day because evolution was working on a different problem. It was not building a creature for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It was shaping a creature that could live through change, remember places, share food, store energy, spend energy, and keep moving between the moment hunger appeared and the moment food became possible. 3 meals are one way modern societies organize that ancient need. They are not the root of the need itself. The root is older than the table, older than the clock, and older than the names we give to meals. It is the quiet ability of the human body to bend without breaking, to wait without ending, and to remain alive in a world that did not always answer hunger at once. Fire did not create the 3-meal day. It changed something deeper and stranger than that. It changed what food could become once humans found it. Before fire could matter, food still had to be reached, gathered, hunted, carried, chosen, or shared. A flame did not make the forest give fruit at a certain hour. It did not make animals stand still. It did not make roots rise from the ground when the stomach became empty. Fire could transform food, but it did not command the timing of food. This difference matters because it keeps the story honest. Cooker placed one of the great turning points in human life, but it was not a clock. It softened some foods, made others safer in many situations, helped release more usable energy from certain plants and animal tissues, and allowed people to widen the range of things they could eat. It may have supported changes in digestion, social life, and the way humans spent time around a shared place of warmth. But the arrival of cooked food did not suddenly divide the human day into breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It gave people new ways to process what the environment offered. It did not make the environment offer food on a modern schedule. A cooked meal can feel orderly. It can feel settled. We may imagine people gathered around fire, eating together, and from that image it is easy to place modern habits backward into the past. But that is where the mistake begins. A fire can gather people, but it does not guarantee 3 predictable eating moments. A group might cook when food was available and when fire, time, safety, fuel, and weather allowed. Some food may have been eaten raw. Some may have been cooked carefully. Some may have been roasted quickly. Some may have been saved or carried if that was possible. The exact patterns would have differed across places and periods, and we should not pretend to know more than the evidence allows. The safer point is that fire made food more changeable, more workable, and often more valuable, while the timing of eating still depended on opportunity. This keeps us close to the origin of the human body. The body that learned cooked food was still an older body living inside uneven landscapes. It still had to move between hunger and supply. It still had to wait when nothing had been found. It still had to use memory, cooperation, and attention to turn the outside world into nourishment. Fire helped with the transformation of food, but not with the guarantee of food. That is why the 3-meal rhythm cannot be explained simply by saying that humans learned to cook. Cooking changed how food entered the body, but not necessarily how many times the body ate each day. It may have made some meals more nourishing, more digestible, and more socially important, yet it did not create the kind of daily predictability that modern meal schedules require. To have 3 regular meals, a society needs more than cooked food. It needs dependable access, storage, settlement, repeated routines, labor patterns, and shared expectations about time. Fire can sit at the center of a group, but a clock has to come much later. There is also a quiet biological angle here. Cooking can reduce the work required to chew or digest some foods. It can make certain calories easier for the body to obtain. This matters for human evolution, and it's one reason cooking is often discussed as part of the story of becoming human. But easier energy is not the same as constant energy. A roasted tuber, cooked meat, or warmed plant food still begins as something that had to be found. The body might benefit from cooked food when it arrived, but it still needed flexibility between arrivals. It still needed to live through the intervals that the landscape created. If anything, Fire shows how human beings solved old problems without erasing them. They did not escape uncertainty all at once. They made uncertainty more manageable. They took food that was tough, risky, cold, or difficult, and sometimes made it softer, safer, warmer, and more shareable. Around fire, eating may have become more social, more memorable, more connected to rest and protection. But even that social warmth should not be confused with the modern idea of a fixed daily menu. A circle around fire is not the same as a dining schedule. It is an ancient tool meeting, an ancient need, long before the day was divided into named meals. Fire changed the relationship between humans and food, but it did not turn hunger into a timetable. It helped the body receive what the world offered, yet the world still offered unevenly. And in that space between transformation and timing, we see the difference between cooking as a human breakthrough and 3 meals a day as a much later arrangement. If fire made food softer, warmer, and often easier to use, it also made eating feel more deliberate. A gathered root could become a cooked root, a piece of meat could be roasted, a hard or fibrous food could be changed by heat into something the teeth and stomach met differently. This mattered because the human body was not only looking for food, but also trying to get usable energy from food. Cooking helped with that problem in many cases. It could reduce chewing effort, alter texture, kill some harmful organisms, and make certain foods more digestible. These are careful, accepted ideas, and they help explain why fire holds such an important place in human history. But they do not explain 3 meals a day. They explain transformation, not timing. They tell us what happened after food was found, not why food would appear 3 times at predictable hours. That difference is easy to miss because cooked food feels closer to what modern people call a meal. It can be placed together, shared together, and remembered as a moment. A fire draws bodies inward. It creates warmth, light, smell, and a center. Around it, people could rest, speak, watch, prepare, and eat. In that sense, fire may have helped make eating more social, more organized, and more meaningful. But social meaning is not the same as a daily schedule. A group could gather around fire when there was food to cook. If there was little, the fire could not invent a meal. If food came late, cooking came late. If movement, danger, weather, or lack of fuel interrupted the day, the rhythm changed. Fire gave humans a powerful way to handle food, but it still worked inside the older rhythm of opportunity. This is why the title question must stay anchored in time. The body that benefited from cooked food was still living long before modern workdays, school hours, factory breaks, and kitchen routines. It was still shaped by landscapes where access to food was uneven. Cooking may have made some foods more valuable, and it may have supported deeper changes in the human body over long periods. But even if cooked food helped humans gain energy more efficiently, efficiency did not automatically become breakfast, lunch, and dinner. A more useful food is still not a guaranteed food. A warmer meal is still not a scheduled meal. A shared fire is still not a clock. What fire may have done is widen the space between raw opportunity and human control. It allowed people to take certain foods and make them fit the body better. It allowed food to become softer, safer in some cases, and easier to share. It may also have helped create evening gatherings, because fire extends light and warmth beyond the natural brightness of day. Yet even here, we must be careful. We cannot claim one universal prehistoric dinner hour. We can only say that fire created new possibilities around food, while the exact pattern of eating would have varied across groups and environments. In the long story of human origins, that is enough. Fire was not the birth of the 3-meal day. It was one step in the human effort to make an uncertain world more livable. It helped turn found food into prepared food. It helped turn danger and darkness into a little more safety. It helped turn eating into something that could gather people together. But beneath all of that, hunger still belonged to a body older than routine. The flame could change the food, but it could not remove the ancient gap between need and availability. And inside that gap, the human body kept learning flexibility. There is a quiet temptation to treat every great human invention as if it immediately made life modern. Fire is one of those inventions. Because cooking feels familiar, because warm food feels like home, And because people today gather around meals in ordered ways, it is easy to imagine that fire quickly turned eating into something like our present routine. But the older story is slower than that. Fire did not erase uncertainty. It softened some of it. It did not remove the dependence on land, season, weather, movement, and group knowledge. It gave humans a new power over food after food entered their reach, but it did not give humans power over all the conditions that made food available in the first place. This is the careful line we have to hold. Fire changed food deeply, but the 3-meal day required a different kind of change. Not only heat, but predictability. To eat 3 regular meals, people need food that can be expected, stored, divided, and returned to at similar points in the day. They need some level of settlement, repeated labor patterns, protected supplies, and shared social timing. Fire alone does not provide those things. A flame can cook what has been gathered. It can warm what has been brought back. It can make certain foods more useful to the body. But it cannot make a dry season generous, cannot make animals appear on command, and cannot make a difficult landscape behave like a pantry. So even with fire, early humans still lived in a world where food came through contact with uncertainty. The body still needed to bridge intervals. The group still needed to search, remember, cooperate, and adapt. What fire offered was not a fixed daily structure, but a deeper kind of flexibility. It allowed more foods to become edible or easier to use. It may have made eating less costly for the jaws and digestion in some cases. It likely gave food more social gravity, because cooking often takes time, attention, and a place where people can gather. Around fire, food could become more than fuel. It could become warmth, safety, smell, sharing, waiting, and memory. But even this richer human scene does not lead directly to breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It leads to a broader truth. Humans were learning to shape food without fully controlling the timing of food. That is a very different thing. The modern meal schedule belongs to a later world, where food is increasingly organized by storage, agriculture, markets, institutions, and clocks. Fire belongs to an older world, where human beings were still negotiating with nature at close range. This helps us answer the title question with more precision. Humans did not evolve to eat 3 meals a day simply because humans learned to cook. Cooking may have supported the evolution of the human body and human society, but it did not require a body that expected 3 fixed meals. It required a body able to use food more efficiently when food appeared. It required hands, attention, memory, cooperation, and patience. It required the ability to gather around a shared source of heat and turn uncertain resources into something more nourishing. In that sense, fire did not end the old hunger. It changed the way hunger could be answered. It made the answer warmer, softer, and sometimes safer, but not necessarily more regular. The ancient body still stood between need and chance. It still carried the older rhythm of waiting, searching, receiving, and continuing. And when we look at fire this way, it becomes not the beginning of 3 meals a day, but one step in a much longer human story. The story of a species slowly learning to make the world more livable, without ever completely escaping the uneven terms on which food first arrived. Farming changed the human relationship with food in a way that was both powerful, fragile. Before farming, people met food through movement, memory, gathering, hunting, fishing, seasonal knowledge, and the shared skill of a group living close to its surroundings. With farming, a different possibility slowly appeared in some parts of the world. Food could be planted, tended, harvested, stored, counted, guarded, and planned for in larger amounts. This was not a single, sudden event, and it did not happen everywhere at once. It unfolded differently across regions, across generations, and across many experiments with plants, animals, water, soil, and settlement. But wherever farming became important, it began to change the old rhythm of opportunity. Food was no longer only something found in the landscape. More and more, it became something produced through repeated labor in a chosen place. This was a major shift, but it still did not immediately create the 3-meal day. Farming made food more predictable in certain ways, yet it also created new kinds of dependence. A field could promise more than a wild patch, but only if rain came, if soil held, if pests did not destroy the crop, if disease did not move through animals, if storage stayed dry, if people could defend what they had grown, and if the harvest was large enough to last. A stored grain pile may look like security, but it also carries a quiet danger. When many people depend heavily on one harvest, a failed season can become more serious than a missed opportunity in the wild. This is why farming should not be described as a simple victory over hunger. It was a trade. It gave some communities more food density, more settlement, more population growth, and more ability to plan. But it also tied those communities to fields, seasons, property, labor, hierarchy, and risk. The body that had once lived with the unevenness of wild food now began to live with the unevenness of agricultural time. There could be planting, tending, waiting, harvesting, storing, grinding, cooking, and rationing. The rhythm became more organized, but not necessarily more relaxed. A farmer's day was not automatically divided into breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It was divided by work, weather, daylight, tools, animals, family needs, and the demands of crops that could not be ignored simply because the body was tired. In this newer world, food became more available in some places, but time became more disciplined. People could not always move away when conditions changed. A village, a field, a storehouse, and a herd made life more rooted. Hunger was no longer only a question of what the land offered that day. It became a question of what had been planted months earlier, what had survived, who controlled the stored food, and how it was divided. That matters for the title question, because 3 regular meals require not just food, but dependable systems around food. Farming helped build some of those systems, but slowly and unevenly. It gave people crops that could be stored, grains that could be processed, animals that could be managed, and settlements where cooking and eating could happen more repeatedly. Yet the pattern was still not universal, and it was still not purely biological. A person might eat according to labor demands, household custom, season, status, scarcity, or festival. The same village might know both abundance and shortage within a single year. The same stored food could create comfort for one family and hunger for another, depending on social power. Farming therefore moved humanity closer to organized meals. But it did not prove that humans evolved for 3 fixed meals a day. It shows something more careful. Once humans began producing food in settled places, hunger became increasingly shaped by storage, work, ownership, and season. The body was still ancient, still flexible, still carrying the older ability to live through intervals. But around that body, a new world was forming, one where food could be planned more often and where the first shadows of scheduled eating could slowly begin to appear. A field can make food seem more predictable, but farming also ties hunger to waiting. Seeds do not become food the moment they are placed into soil. Animals do not grow because people are hungry. Grain does not grind itself. A farming world asks the body to live inside longer cycles. Planting, watering, weeding, guarding, harvesting, drying, storing, processing, cooking, and dividing. This was very different from finding food directly in a landscape, but it was not yet the same as living inside a modern meal schedule. In many agricultural societies, food became more connected to work than to appetite alone. The day could be shaped by the demands of fields, animals, tools, weather, and daylight. People might eat before labor, during a pause, after labor, or whenever household and seasonal conditions allowed. The stomach still mattered, but it was no longer the only voice. The crop had its own timing, the herd had its own timing. The sun had its own timing. The stored harvest had to be protected across weeks or months, and that meant people had to think not only about eating now, but about having enough later. This is one of the great shifts in the long story of human food. Farming made planning more important. It allowed some foods, especially grains in many places, to be kept longer than many wild foods could be kept. Storage changed the meaning of hunger because it created a space between need and supply. Food could be present in a storehouse, yet still be controlled, measured, saved, taxed, guarded, or withheld. A person could live near food and still not eat freely. This is why farming cannot be treated as the simple birth of abundance. It created a new relationship between the body and authority. Once food could be stored, someone had to decide how it was used. Families, elders, chiefs, temples, rulers, landlords, or later states could influence who ate, when they ate, and how much they received. The meal became less purely environmental and more social. But even here, the 3-meal day was not a biological law appearing from the soil. It was one possible outcome of later organization. Early agricultural life likely contained many eating rhythms, depending on region, crop, season, status, and labor. A harvest period could demand long hours. A winter store could require caution. A festival could bring more food than usual. A poor season could reduce meals. A wealthy household could eat differently from a laboring household. The number of meals in a day was therefore not just about the human body. It was about land, storage, work, and social position. This brings us back to the deeper origin of the title. Humans did not evolve for 3 meals a day because the human body is older than farming, and farming itself did not immediately create one fixed eating pattern. What farming did was begin to narrow the wild uncertainty of food into a more organized, more repetitive, but still vulnerable system. Hunger was no longer answered only by searching the nearby world. It was answered by the success of past labor, by the condition of stored food, by the season, and by the rules of a settled community. In that world, eating could become more regular than before, but regular does not mean universal. A bowl of grain, a piece of bread, a cooked porridge, or a shared stew might fit into the rhythm of work and household life. Yet the day still did not have to fall naturally into 3 equal parts. The body remained flexible because life still required flexibility. Crops could fail, stores could run low, labor could begin before appetite was satisfied. Food could be saved when hunger wanted it now. Farming gave humans a stronger hand against uncertainty, but it also taught them a new kind of dependence. Dependence on the field, the season, the storehouse, and the social order built around them. Farming brought food closer to human control, but it did not remove the old uncertainty from hunger. It changed the shape of uncertainty. Instead of following only wild plants, moving animals, seasonal patches, or rivers and coasts, people now had to follow the slower demands of fields, seeds, soil, stored grain, domesticated animals, and settled places. A farming community could look at land and see future food, but future food is not the same as present food. A planted field is a promise that may or may not be kept. Rain may come too late, insects may spread, stored grain may spoil, animals may sicken, conflict may disturb harvests. A family may work hard and still face a poor year. This is why agriculture should not be imagined as the moment humans simply escaped the unevenness of food. It was a new agreement with nature, and like every agreement with nature, it had conditions. The older hunter-gatherer world had required movement and flexibility across a living landscape. The farming world required patience, repetition, protection, and dependence on what had been prepared long before hunger appeared. In that world, the body still did not become a creature built for 3 fixed meals. It became a body living inside a new kind of time. Agricultural time stretched beyond a single day. It reached into seasons. It asked people to think about spring before winter, harvest before hunger, storage before scarcity, and work before eating. A person could be surrounded by food in one month and worried about food in another. A village could celebrate after harvest and ration carefully before the next one. The day might contain eating moments, but those moments were shaped by labor, household custom, available stores, social rank, and the rhythm of work. Some people might eat before going into the field. Some might eat during a pause. Some might eat after long labor. Some might eat more when food was plentiful and less when supplies tightened. Across societies, the pattern would not have been one clean human rule. It would have been many local habits built from crop type, climate, tools, wealth, and social organization. This is the important bridge between ancient hunger and the later 3-meal day. Farming made regular eating more possible, but possibility is not destiny. A bowl of grain in a house, a stored harvest in a village, or an animal kept near settlement could make food more repeatable than before. Yet repeatable food still needed grinding, cooking, fuel, water, time, and permission within a social world. It was not simply the body deciding. It was the household deciding. It was the season deciding. It was the store deciding. It was the workday deciding. It was sometimes the powerful deciding. Once food could be stored, it could also be measured, taxed, guarded, traded, and controlled. Hunger, therefore, became more organized but also more unequal. This matters because 3 meals a day can look like a natural pattern only when we forget all the systems standing behind it. The body alone did not invent that pattern. Fields helped. Storage helped. Settlement helped. Later markets, labor schedules, schools and clocks would help even more. But in the farming world itself, we see only part of the path. We see food becoming more planned, but not fully modern. We see the beginning of repeated routines, but not a universal schedule. We see humans gaining more influence over food, while still depending on soil, weather, season, storage, and social order. So the lesson of farming is not that humans finally became 3-meal creatures. The lesson is quieter. Farming narrowed some old uncertainties and created new ones. It made food less purely a matter of chance, but more deeply tied to work, place, ownership, and time. The ancient body still carried flexibility because it still needed flexibility. It had to live through heavy labor, delayed harvests, uneven stores, and the long wait between planting and eating. And as humanity moved from wild opportunity into cultivated dependence, the body remained older than the system around it, still shaped by a deeper past in which food had never arrived simply because the day had reached the proper hour. As farming communities grew into larger settlements, hunger began to move through a new kind of world. Food was still biological, still tied to the stomach, the muscles, the brain, and the daily need for energy, but it was no longer only a matter between one body and one landscape. It became part of a larger order. Fields had to be worked by many hands. Water had to be managed. Harvests had to be stored. Animals had to be watched. Grain had to be measured, moved, protected, and sometimes given to people who did not grow it themselves. As villages expanded into towns and towns into early civilizations, food became connected to rules, duties, records, temples, rulers, markets, soldiers, builders, and workers. Hunger was still felt inside the body, but the answer to hunger increasingly passed through society. This is one of the quiet turning points in the history of eating. A person might be hungry, lifed, yet whether food arrived could depend on household stores, family rank, labor obligations, taxes, offerings, wages, or the decisions of people with power. A field could produce food, but that food might not remain with the hands that harvested it. A storehouse could hold grain, but a storehouse is not the same as a shared meal. It is a social object. It can feed, protect, reward, control, or exclude. In this newer world, meals became more organized not because the body suddenly changed, but because human life around the body became more organized. The day began to be shaped by work that involved many people at once. Irrigation, building, herding, grinding grain, carrying water, tending fires, preparing food, and serving households all required coordination. When people coordinate, time becomes important. Not necessarily clock time in the modern sense, but repeated time. Morning labor, daylight labor, rest after effort, food before work, food after work, food for rituals, food for travelers, food for workers, food for rulers, food for the dead, food for gods. Eating entered the structure of civilization, but this still does not mean that 3 meals a day had become a human law. It means that food was becoming more scheduled by social need. Different people inside the same civilization may have eaten very differently. A ruler's household did not eat like a poor laborer's household. A priest, a farmer, a soldier, a craft worker, a servant, and a child did not necessarily share the same rhythm. Status could shape food. Work could shape food. Gender, age, season, ceremony, shortage, and local custom could shape food. A day of harvest might not feel like a day of rest. A festival might not feel like an ordinary week. A famine or drought could break whatever rhythm had seemed stable before. The rise of civilization made hunger more organized, but organization is not the same as equality, and it is not the same as biological design. This matters deeply for the title question because modern people often look backward and imagine that once society became settled, the 3-meal pattern must have naturally appeared. But settled life did not create one universal eating day. It created institutions around food. It created storage, distribution, status, obligation, and routine. The body remained the older body, carrying the flexible systems shaped long before cities. Around it, however, the human world became more structured. The body might still be able to wait, but society could now tell it when waiting was required. The body might still respond to hunger, but labor could interrupt that response. The body might still prefer food when energy was low, but ritual, hierarchy, scarcity, or duty could decide the actual moment of eating. In that sense, civilization did not simply feed hunger. It organized hunger. It gave hunger places to go: the kitchen, the field, the storehouse, the temple, the market, the worksite, the family hearth. It began to pull eating away from pure opportunity and into shared systems of time and power. Yet beneath those systems, the ancient question remained unchanged. The body needed energy. The world did not always provide it evenly. And now, between the body and the food, there stood something new: civilization itself. Once food entered the machinery of civilization, eating began to carry meanings that were larger than appetite. Grain could become tax. Bread could become payment. Beer, porridge, oil, meat, fruit, and stored crops could move through systems of labor, worship, trade, debt, hospitality, and rank. A person might still feel hunger in the same private way, as an emptiness or pull inside the body, but the path from hunger to food had become much more complicated. In smaller, more mobile worlds, the question may have been whether food could be found, gathered, caught, carried, or shared. In larger settled worlds, the question increasingly became who had access, who had authority, who had worked, who was owed, who could command stores, and who had to wait. This was not the birth of 3 meals a day. It was the birth of something more social, the management of hunger by organized life. A civilization can turn food into routine, but it can also turn food into control. A worker may eat because the workday allows a pause. A household may prepare food when fuel, water, grain, and labor are available. A ruler may display abundance to show power. A temple may receive offerings that connect food to the sacred. A soldier may depend on rations carried by others. A builder may eat according to the demands of a project larger than any one body. In all of these cases, the body's need remains ancient, but the answer to that need is filtered through human systems. The stomach has not evolved into a clock, yet society begins to act like one. It tells bodies when to gather, when to labor, when to wait, when to share, and when food will be given. This is an important step toward the modern world, but it is still not the same as a universal 3-meal pattern. Civilizations were not all alike. They rose in different landscapes, around different crops, rivers, animals, climates, and forms of rule. Some relied heavily on grain. Some included more pastoral life. Some drew food from rivers, fields, orchards, trade routes, or tribute. Eating rhythms would have followed local materials and social habits. A person in a wealthy household might have more frequent or varied food than a field laborer. Someone involved in heavy work might eat around effort and daylight. Someone in a ritual setting might eat according to ceremony. Someone in shortage might eat less often, or with more caution. The number of meals was therefore not a simple expression of human biology. It was a result of circumstance. Civilization made the day more ordered, but order did not fall evenly on every person. That point keeps the story truthful. When people today imagine an ancient city, they may picture markets, kitchens, bread ovens, bowls, smoke, stored grain, and people eating at familiar times. Some of that may be partly right in certain places, but it is too easy to smooth the past into the present. The deeper reality is that early organized societies were still close to risk. Drought could weaken a harvest. Floods could damage fields. War could interrupt storage and transport. Disease could affect animals or people. A ruler could take food from one group and give it to another. A family could be secure in one season and vulnerable in the next. The growth of civilization did not erase the body's older relationship with uncertainty. It added layers above it. Now hunger had to pass not only through nature, but through institutions. And institutions can stabilize life, but they can also make life dependent on rules that the body did not choose. This helps explain why humans did not evolve specifically for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. By the time large societies began organizing food more clearly, the human body was already ancient. Its basic flexibility had been shaped across a much longer past, when eating was tied to opportunity, group knowledge, and changing landscapes. Civilization did not rewrite that body overnight. It surrounded the body with new patterns. It made food more countable, more storable, more distributable, and more symbolic. It made eating part of household order, public labor, status, ceremony, and power. But under those patterns, the same old need remained. A living body asking for energy in a world where access to energy still depended on forces beyond hunger itself. The meal was becoming a social event, but the body that entered it still belonged to a much older story. Civilization gave hunger a public shape. It took a feeling that began inside the body and placed it into storehouses, kitchens, workshops, temples, fields, markets, and roads. A hungry person was no longer only facing the question of what the land might offer. In many settled societies, that person was also facing the question of how food moved through human order. Who grew it? Who stored it? Who owned it? Who prepared it? Who served it? Who received more? Who received less? These questions did not come from the stomach, but they could decide what happened to the stomach. This is why the rise of civilization is so important to the story of meals. It shows that eating became more organized before it became truly modern. It also shows that organization did not mean the body had evolved for 3 fixed meals. It meant that society was learning to arrange hunger around labor, rank, ritual, and supply. The body remained old, but the world around the body became increasingly structured. A worker could be fed because a work project required strength. A soldier could receive rations because an army needed movement and discipline. A household could prepare food according to fuel, water, grinding, cooking, and family custom. A religious ceremony could place food in a sacred order. A ruler's table could display power through abundance. In each case, eating had become more than the simple answer to hunger. It was part of a larger system. But larger systems do not create one universal daily rhythm for all humans. They create many rhythms, often unequal ones. A person with status might eat differently from a person with little land. A servant might eat after others. A field worker might eat around daylight and labor. A child, an elder, a traveler, a prisoner, or a craft worker might each live with a different pattern. A festival day might be rich. A shortage might be severe. A harvest season might be heavy with work. A failed crop might break the ordinary rhythm completely. This matters because the 3-meal day can look ancient, only if we flatten all these differences. But civilization was not a single table where everyone sat down at the same hour. It was a web of human arrangements, and food moved through that web unevenly. The older body had to live inside these new arrangements, but it did not stop being the older body. It still needed energy. It still had to manage delay. It still had to use what had been eaten earlier. It still had to continue when food was postponed by work, duty, shortage, distance, or command. In this way, civilization did not replace biological flexibility. It depended on it. A body that could not wait would struggle under labor. A body that could not work between meals would not fit easily into farming, building, travel, carrying, herding, or household tasks. The human body's older capacity to live through intervals allowed societies to organize food in ways that were not always gentle. This does not mean suffering was the purpose of the body. It means the body's flexibility could be used by culture, sometimes for care, sometimes for control. The deeper answer to the title question becomes clearer here. Humans did not evolve to eat 3 meals a day because, by the time meals were becoming more structured, the main force shaping them was not evolution alone. It was civilization. It was the coordination of people, stores, labor, and power. The meal was becoming a social tool. It could gather people, divide people, reward people, discipline people, or mark the difference between ordinary time and special time. Yet none of this proves that the human body was built around breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It proves almost the opposite. It shows how a body shaped in older landscapes could be placed inside newer systems. Those systems slowly trained appetite, habit, and expectation. They made eating more predictable in some ways, but also more dependent on rules outside the body. Civilization began to organize hunger, but it did not erase the ancient hunger beneath it. Under the storehouse, under the kitchen, under the ration, under the feast, under the work pause, there remained the same quiet body that had first learned to live with uncertainty, to wait, to share, and to keep going until food became possible again. The history of meals becomes clearer when we stop imagining one average human and begin seeing different bodies inside the same society. In a large settlement, a ruler's body, a farmer's body, a servant's body, a craft worker's body, and a child's body all needed energy, but they did not meet food in the same way. Hunger was biological, yet access was social. A person with land, stored grain, animals, servants, or authority could live with a different rhythm from someone who labored for food, carried food, prepared food, or waited for food to be given. This difference matters because the 3-meal day often sounds like a neutral human pattern, as if everyone everywhere naturally moved through the same morning, middle, and evening rhythm. But the deeper record of human life suggests something less neat. Eating has often been uneven, not only because nature was uneven, but because society was uneven too. When communities grew more complex, food did not simply become more available to everyone in the same way. It became part of status, work, duty, wealth, and dependence. A person working in fields might eat around daylight and labor. Someone grinding grain, carrying water, tending animals, or serving a household might eat according to the needs of others. A soldier might receive rations as part of discipline and movement. A poor family might stretch food carefully across the day. A wealthy household might have more choice, more variety, and more freedom about when food appeared. These are broad patterns, and they varied across places and periods, but the important point is cautious and strong. There was no single ancient eating schedule shared equally by all human beings. The body may have been old and flexible, but the social world placed different pressures on different bodies. This is one reason we must be careful with the phrase normal meals. Normal for whom? For the person who owns the storehouse or for the person who fills it? For the household that can cook when it wishes? Or for the worker whose eating depends on a pause in labor? For the child in a secure family? Or for the traveler who depends on hospitality? A meal can look simple when it is placed on a table, but behind it may stand land, fuel, water, tools, time, rank, and labor that someone had to provide. In many societies, eating was not just a private act. It was a visible sign of one's place in the human order. Who ate first, who ate later, who ate better, who ate leftovers, who ate in public, who ate in silence, who served, and who was served could all carry meaning. This does not mean every society was cruel or every meal was controlled. Families shared food. Communities cared for each other. Feasts and rituals could bring people together. But the fact that food could unite people does not erase the fact that food could also divide them. The 3-meal pattern, when treated as timeless biology, hides these divisions. It makes human eating sound like a smooth, natural rhythm, when much of history was shaped by unequal access and unequal time. The body of a laborer did not stop needing energy because the work was unfinished. The body of a servant did not stop feeling hunger because someone else had not eaten yet. The body of a poor farmer did not become less human because the stored grain had to last until the next harvest. These bodies carried the same ancient need, but their days were arranged by different forces. This brings the title question into a sharper social light. Humans did not evolve to eat 3 meals a day because human life did not develop as one equal schedule. Even after farming and civilization made food more organized, eating remained tied to class, work, season, household, and power. The body could adapt to routines, but routines were not distributed evenly. Some people may have eaten regularly. Others may have eaten when labor allowed, when stores allowed, or when someone with authority allowed. The older flexibility of the human body made survival possible inside these uneven worlds, but it should not be mistaken for proof that those worlds were ideal. It only shows that the human body could endure many patterns. Before the modern meal schedule became familiar, hunger had already passed through thousands of years of unequal days, where food was not just a question of appetite, but of one's place in the long and shifting structure of human society. A working body has always had to negotiate with time, but not everyone has owned the same time. This is one of the quiet truths behind the history of eating. A person with control over land, household labor, servants, animals, storage, or money could often shape the day around food more easily. Food could be prepared before hunger became sharp. A pause could be chosen. A meal could be delayed for comfort rather than necessity. But a person whose life was ruled by labor often met food differently. The day could begin before the body felt ready. Work could continue after hunger had appeared. Eating could depend on the sun, the field, the employer, the household, the market, the army, the road, or the needs of someone with more authority. The stomach was personal, but the hour of eating was often not. This makes the idea of a universal 3-meal day difficult to place deep in history. 3 meals require not only food, but permission, time, fuel, preparation, and a pause in the day. A person cutting grain, carrying water, grinding flour, tending animals, cleaning, building, serving, rowing, marching, or travelling could not always stop because hunger had reached a familiar point. The body could ask, but the world of work could refuse. In many societies, the poor and the labouring may have eaten in ways shaped by necessity rather than by comfort. Some food might be taken early to support labour, some might be eaten later when work allowed. Some might be stretched carefully because stores were limited. Some might be simple, repetitive, and tied to the cheapest or most available staples. A wealthy household, by contrast, might have more varied foods, more regular preparation, and more people whose labour made that regularity possible. The rhythm that feels natural to one group can be invisible labour for another. That is why meal history is not only about biology, it is also about who has enough control over the day to turn hunger into a routine. The human body did not change its basic nature when someone became a farmer, servant, soldier, craft worker, merchant, or ruler. Each body still needed energy, warmth, repair, and rest. But society placed those bodies into different arrangements. A soldier's ration was not the same thing as a family meal. A servant's eating time was not the same thing as the table being served. A field worker's food pause was not the same thing as a leisurely meal. A child's hunger might be answered differently depending on the security of the household. An elder might be cared for, neglected, honoured, or dependent, depending on custom and circumstance. In all these cases, eating was shaped by relationships. Food moved through human bonds, obligations, and inequalities. The title question becomes deeper when we notice this. If humans had truly evolved for a fixed 3-meal day, we would expect that pattern to sit beneath society like a universal foundation. But history points to something more uneven. What sits beneath society is not 3 meals. It is need. It is appetite. It is use energy across time. It is the capacity to endure delay. It is the social importance of sharing food when food is available. The fixed schedule comes later, when certain forms of life make it easier to repeat eating at expected hours. And even then, the schedule does not arrive equally for everyone. It spreads through households, institutions, armies, monasteries, farms, workshops, schools, factories, offices, and markets in different ways. The body can learn these patterns, but it does not prove they are ancient biological commands. It proves the body can be trained by the world it lives in. For the poor, for workers, for people whose time belonged partly to others, hunger may have been something managed around duty. For the powerful, hunger could be surrounded by service and choice. Between these lives, the same human body appears in different historical light. One body waits because it must. Another waits because it chooses. One body eats when labour pauses. Another eats when food is brought. The difference is not evolution. The difference is social order. And this is why the story of 3 meals a day cannot be told as if all humans walked through the same hours. Before the modern schedule became familiar, human hunger had already lived inside inequality, labour, dependence, and survival. It was never just a clock inside the body. It was also a place inside society. The uneven history of eating reminds us that a meal is never only food. It is also time, place, permission, labour, and relationship. A person may need energy in the body, but the way that energy arrives can reveal the shape of an entire society. In one household, food might be prepared by other hands before the person who eats it even feels hunger. In another, food might come only after long work, after waiting, after measuring what remains, after deciding how much can be used now and how much must be saved. The body's need may be similar, but the path to satisfaction can be very different. This is why the story of 3 meals a day becomes weaker when we look at real human variety. It is not enough to ask what the body wants. We also have to ask what the person's world allows. Across history, some people lived near abundance without owning it. Some worked around food without eating freely from it. Some harvested grain that was owed elsewhere. Some cooked for others before eating themselves. Some marched with rations. Some travelled with uncertain supplies. Some depended on charity, hospitality, family, religious institutions, employers, or rulers. The stomach was inside the body, but the answer to the stomach often came from outside the body. That outside world could be generous, harsh, orderly, chaotic, intimate, or unequal. It could turn eating into comfort, duty, reward, discipline, celebration, or survival. None of these forms can be reduced honestly to one natural daily pattern. This is where the modern imagination can become too smooth. When many people today hear breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they may picture 3 ordinary pauses in a normal day. But normal days are historical creations. They depend on food systems, work routines, wages, kitchens, schools, shops, transport, and shared expectations about time. Earlier worlds had their own forms of order, but those forms did not make every person eat in the same way. A poor labourer's day, a wealthy household's day, a shepherd's day, a soldier's day, a farmer's day, and a servant's day could all carry different rhythms. Even within one society, the timing and quality of food could shift with season, harvest, age, gender, status, illness, travel, ceremony, and crisis. A fixed 3-meal rhythm is too narrow to contain that long human diversity. The body beneath all of these lives remained adaptable. It could feel hunger during work. It could accept food when it arrived. It could continue through delay. It could learn expectation from repeated routines. But this adaptability should not be mistaken for a sign that every routine is biologically ancient. The body can learn many forms of eating because it has always had to live inside changing conditions. That is the deeper continuity. Not 3 meals, but flexibility. Not one universal schedule, but the capacity to survive many schedules, many shortages, many forms of sharing, and many social arrangements. In a sense, inequality itself depended on this flexibility. Societies could ask some bodies to work before eating, serve before eating, march before eating, wait before eating, or eat less so that stored food lasted longer. The fact that people could endure such patterns does not make those patterns natural or ideal. It only shows that human biology is broad enough to be shaped by culture, sometimes kindly and sometimes not. By the end of this social step, the title question becomes clearer. Humans did not evolve to eat 3 meals a day because human history never moved as one equal household sitting down at one equal table. The history of eating passed through forests and fields, fire circles and storehouses, villages and cities, kitchens and work sites, wealth and poverty, choice and dependence. The body learned to live through many of these worlds, but none of them proves that breakfast, lunch, and dinner were written into human nature from the beginning. What was written much deeper was the need for energy, the ability to wait, the pull toward sharing, and the quiet resilience required to keep going when food, time, and power were not evenly given. Breakfast feels so natural in the modern day that it can seem almost older than history. A person wakes, the body rises from sleep, and food appears as if morning itself has always carried a meal inside it. But the first food of the day has not always held the same meaning. In many times and places, the beginning of the day was not automatically organized around eating. Some people may have eaten early because their work demanded strength. Others may have waited because food needed preparation, because the household had its own order, because labor began before cooking, or because custom did not treat morning food as important. The body woke every day, but breakfast as a fixed social expectation did not wake with it. This difference matters because the title question asks whether humans evolved for 3 meals a day. If even the first modern meal has a changing history, then the whole structure begins to look less like biology and more like culture. Morning hunger is real, but the meaning of morning hunger can be trained by habit. A body that receives food every day soon after waking may begin to expect food at that time. Smells, light, movement, family routine, work preparation, and memory can all teach the body that eating belongs near the start of the day. Yet that learned expectation should not be confused with an ancient rule. Long before kitchens, clocks, and morning routines, waking meant returning to the conditions of the world. Was there food nearby? Was there fuel? Was it safe to move? Had anything been gathered or stored? Did the group need to travel first? Was the season generous or difficult? The start of daylight did not guarantee the start of eating. In early human life, the body could wake hungry and still need to wait. That older possibility did not disappear immediately when societies became settled. Even after farming, morning food depended on work, stores, social position, and local custom. Grain might need grinding. Water might need carrying. Fire might need tending. Animals might need care. Fields might demand early labor before heat or weather changed. In some households, a small early food may have helped people begin the day. In others, the main eating moment may have come later. In poorer homes, food might be stretched carefully. In richer homes, morning eating could be more available, more varied, or more ceremonial. No single pattern can honestly be placed over all human societies. What we can say more safely is that breakfast, as a firm and expected daily category, belongs to the history of social organization, not to the deepest origin of the human body. This is why breakfast is such a useful doorway into the larger story. It shows how a meal can become familiar enough to feel natural. Once a society repeats a rhythm long enough, the rhythm enters the body's expectations. Children grow up inside it. Work begins around it. Markets sell toward it. Families name it. Health language surrounds it. Soon the meal feels less like an invention and more like common sense. But common sense is often history that has become quiet. Breakfast did not have to exist in the same way everywhere. It became important through many forces: labor patterns, religious customs, household organization, urban life, later industrial schedules, and the growing availability of foods that could be prepared quickly in the morning. The body could adapt to those forces because the body is flexible. It could learn the morning as a time for food. But the ability to learn breakfast does not mean breakfast was written into human nature from the beginning. It means human hunger can be shaped by the world that surrounds it. Under the modern morning meal, there is still an older body that once woke into uncertainty, not into a guaranteed plate. That older body knew daylight as a chance to search, move, remember, gather, work, and wait. Breakfast, then, is not false. It is simply younger than hunger. It is a social answer to an ancient need, and like many social answers, it can feel timeless only after people have repeated it for a very long time. The idea of breakfast becomes even more interesting when we notice that waking and eating are not the same biological event. Waking is a daily return to awareness. Eating is a response to need, habit, availability, and culture. In modern life, these two events are often tied together so closely that they can feel inseparable. The alarm sounds, the body rises, and food is expected before the day begins properly. But in the longer human story, morning was not always a doorway into a meal. It was a doorway into whatever the day required. For some people, that may have meant eating early if food was available and work was hard. For others, it may have meant moving first, tending animals, fetching water, preparing a fire, grinding grain, walking to fields, or waiting until food could be made ready. The body did not wake inside a universal breakfast rule. It woke inside a household, a landscape, a season, and a social order. This helps us avoid a common mistake. We should not say that ancient people never ate in the morning. That would be too absolute and almost certainly wrong. In many settings, people could have eaten something early, especially when food was left from before, when labor demanded it, or when household routine made it possible. The careful point is different. Morning eating was not always the formal, expected, culturally powerful meal that many modern people now imagine. It could be small, practical, irregular, seasonal, or shaped by work. It could exist in one group and matter less in another. It could be normal for one class and less available for another. This variety shows again why the human body cannot be reduced to 3 fixed meals. The body is older than the names of meals, and the first food after sleep has carried many meanings across time. In some lives, morning food may have been fuel for labor. In others, it may have been a sign of comfort. In others, it may have been delayed by scarcity or duty. In still others, The main eating of the day may have belonged to a later hour. What matters for the title is that breakfast became more solid as societies became more organized around repeated daily routines. When work begins at a known hour, when children must be prepared for school, when people leave home for fields, workshops, factories, offices, or roads, the morning becomes a place where food can be scheduled. The meal is no longer only about hunger, it becomes preparation. It says, the day is about to demand something from the body, so food should be placed before that demand. This is practical. It can be comforting. It can make sense inside modern life. But practicality is not the same as ancient origin. The body can accept morning food because it can adapt to routine. It can come to expect it because repetition trains appetite. But that does not mean evolution shaped humans specifically for a named meal after waking. It means human biology is responsive enough to live inside many social patterns. Breakfast also shows how food becomes surrounded by ideas. Over time, societies can attach moral, medical, religious, economic, or family meanings to a meal. A morning meal can become a sign of discipline, care, prosperity, childhood, work readiness, or domestic order. Markets can build foods around it. Workplaces can assume it has happened. Families can organize the beginning of the day around it. Once these meanings become strong, skipping or delaying breakfast may feel not only unusual, but almost against the order of the day. Yet, that feeling is historical. It has been made by repetition, institutions, and expectation. The older human body knew waking before it knew breakfast. It knew hunger before it knew morning menus. It knew the need for energy before it knew the idea that the day should begin with a formal meal. This does not make breakfast wrong, it only makes it human in a different way. Breakfast is not a fossil from the beginning of our species. It is a cultural answer that grew around an ancient body, and because that body was flexible, it could turn a repeated morning practice into something that now feels deeply natural. Breakfast became powerful because it settled into the doorway between sleep and labor. It did not have to begin as a universal human law in order to become a strong modern expectation. A repeated practice can grow until it feels older than it is. When a child wakes many mornings and food is there, the body learns morning through food. When a worker leaves home after eating, the day begins to feel incomplete without that first act. When schools, roads, offices, markets, and kitchens all assume that people have eaten before they arrive, breakfast becomes more than a meal. It becomes part of the architecture of the day. Yet this architecture was built slowly around a body that had already lived for a very long time without such fixed design. The older human body did not know morning as a named meal. It knew morning as light, temperature, movement, danger, memory, and possibility. It could wake into hunger, but hunger still had to meet the world. If food was present, eating could happen. If food was not present, the body had to move into the day without the comfort of a guaranteed beginning. This is not a claim that people in the past never ate early. Some surely did, in many different ways. The careful point is that the first food of the day did not belong to one timeless pattern across all human life. It belonged to circumstance. In farming households, morning might have been shaped by animals, fields, water, fuel, and stored food. In poorer households, it might have been shaped by what remained from the previous day. In wealthier households, it might have carried more comfort and choice. In travelling lives, it might have depended on what could be carried. In labouring lives, it might have been placed before work, delayed by work, or reduced by necessity. The body underneath these situations was the same kind of body, but the morning around it was not the same kind of morning. That difference helps answer the larger question. If breakfast itself has changed so much, then 3 meals a day cannot be treated as a deep biological blueprint. It is a cultural structure built from many smaller structures: waking time, household work, food storage, labour demand, social rank, tools, markets, and eventually clocks. The human body can become accustomed to this structure. It can anticipate it. It can feel hunger because the morning routine has taught it to expect food. But anticipation is not the same as origin. A body can learn a bell, a smell, a kitchen sound, a family habit, or a work schedule. Long before those cues, it learned other cues: a season, a track, a tree, a tide, a fire, a shared return with food. The same flexibility that once helped humans respond to nature now helps modern humans respond to routine. Breakfast is a clear example of that flexibility. It is familiar, useful, and emotionally strong for many people, but it is not proof that evolution shaped humans around three named meals. It is proof that the human body can be trained by repeated worlds. This is why the story should not attack breakfast and should not turn history into advice. A morning meal may be helpful for many people, depending on their health, work, age, preference, and daily life. The point is not to say what anyone should do. The point is to see the difference between what is useful now and what is ancient in the body. Hunger is ancient. Energy need is ancient. The ability to wait, adapt, and learn patterns is ancient. Breakfast, as a fixed expectation, is much younger. It stands at the front of the modern day, but it does not stand at the beginning of human evolution. Beneath it is a longer memory of waking without certainty, moving before comfort, and meeting food when the world allowed it. In that older memory, morning was not automatically a meal. Morning was simply the opening of another uncertain day. Lunch may feel like the most logical meal in the modern day, because it sits in the middle of effort. Morning has begun, work has taken hold, the body has spent energy, and a pause appears. Food enters that pause and seems to belong there. But this middle meal is not simply a message from ancient biology. It is also a product of organized labor. The body needs energy across the day, but the idea that the day should stop at a particular middle point for a named meal depends on the way people arrange work, movement, school, travel, and time. In the deeper human past, the middle of the day did not always create a clean eating moment. The sun could be high, the body could be tired, and hunger could be present. But food still depended on what had been found, what had been carried, what could be prepared, and whether the group could safely pause. Midday light did not automatically produce lunch. It only created conditions inside which people might continue moving, rest from heat, search in another direction, return to a shelter, share what was available, or wait until later. This is why lunch belongs so strongly to the history of work. Once people lived in more settled societies, once fields, workshops, roads, schools, armies, and later factories began to structure the day, the middle hours became easier to organize. Labor could be divided into before and after. A pause could be placed between tasks. Food could be used to restore strength, mark a break, gather workers, or maintain discipline. In this world, eating at midday was not only about hunger, it was about keeping bodies useful inside a larger system. A farmer might need food around the demands of field labor. A craft worker might pause when light, tools, or household rhythms allowed. A soldier might eat according to ration and command. A child in school might eat when the institution made space for it. A factory worker might eat when the shift allowed, not necessarily when the body first asked. The meal becomes attached to labor because labor requires bodies to continue. This does not make lunch unnatural, and it does not make it meaningless. It simply places lunch in history. The body can welcome food in the middle of the day. It can learn to expect it. If food appears at noon, day after day, appetite may begin to rise before the food is even seen. The smell of cooking, the sound of a break, the movement of other people, or the habit of stopping work can all teach the body that this is a time for eating. But a learned expectation is not the same as an evolutionary blueprint. Before human life was organized by repeated work schedules, the middle of the day was only one part of a changing environment. It might be a time of heat, rest, travel, danger, searching, or return. The body had to respond to those conditions, not to a universal lunch hour. This is especially important for the title question because lunch can seem more biological than it really is. People feel hungry after working, and that hunger is real. Muscles spend energy. Attention becomes tired. The body may need food, water, rest, or relief. But the specific form called lunch comes from the social shaping of that need. It turns the body's ongoing demand for energy into a scheduled stop. That scheduled stop becomes stronger when many people must coordinate their day together. A school cannot have every child eat whenever hunger appears. A factory cannot stop at a different time for every worker. An army cannot move if every body follows only its private appetite. A city depends on repeated patterns. Lunch is one of those patterns. It is a way society places food into the working day. The older human body beneath it remains more flexible. It was shaped to move through effort and delay, to use stored energy, to respond when food appeared, and to continue when food had not yet arrived. Lunch, then, is not the ancient center of human eating. It is a later bridge between hunger and labor. It shows how societies learn to manage bodies across the day, giving food a place not because evolution demanded one exact hour, but because organized work needed a pause. The middle of the day became important not because the human body discovered a fixed ancient law, but because work learned to divide time. Once people were expected to labor for many hours in a field, a workshop, a road crew, a ship, a military camp, a school, or later a factory, the body's need for energy had to be placed somewhere inside the structure of the day. Food could no longer be only an answer to opportunity, as it had been in older landscapes. It became part of keeping labor moving. A pause could protect strength, restore attention, mark obedience to a shared rhythm, and allow many bodies to continue under one plan. In that sense, lunch is a very human invention, but not because it came directly from evolution. It came from the meeting point between the old body and organized work. The body had always needed energy. The body had always become tired. The body had always needed rest, water, repair, and relief from effort. But the named midday meal grew stronger when societies needed to coordinate those needs across groups. A single person wandering, gathering, or searching could eat when food appeared, when safety allowed, or when the group stopped. A group of workers under a shared task could not always follow that open rhythm. Their time was shaped by fields, employers, masters, commanders, bells, wages, daylight, tools, and later industrial systems. The eating pause became less like a response to the living landscape and more like a response to the working day. This is why lunch can feel biological and social at the same time. A tired body may genuinely welcome food in the middle hours. A person who has spent the morning moving, thinking, carrying, teaching, digging, building, or walking may feel a real drop in comfort and attention. But the exact placement of the meal is not written into the bones. It is trained by repetition. If a person stops at noon for years, the body may begin to expect food near noon. If a school releases children at a certain time, hunger begins to gather around that time. If a workplace allows only one break, appetite learns to meet the break rather than the other way around. The body adapts because it is responsive. It listens to habit as well as need. It learns the sound of other people stopping. It learns the smell of prepared food. It learns the small rituals of leaving a task, opening a container, sitting down, and returning to work. These cues become part of hunger, but they are not the ancient beginning of hunger. They are modern and historical layers placed over an older system. In the deeper human past, the middle of the day may have held many possible meanings. It could be a time of heat, when movement slowed. It could be a time to rest in shade. It could be a time to continue following an animal track, return with gathered food, prepare something already found, or move toward water. It could be a time when eating happened, but it did not have to be a time named lunch. The land did not provide a bell. The sun did not divide food into equal social units. The body moved through the day according to what the world allowed. This older pattern matters because it shows how different lunch is from raw hunger. Hunger belongs to the body's need for energy. Lunch belongs to the history of organizing people. It is not false. It is not useless. It may be deeply practical. It can give rest to workers, order to families, structure to schools, and predictability to daily life. But practicality should not be mistaken for origin. The 3-meal day becomes easier to understand when each meal is seen as a historical answer to an ancient need. Breakfast answers the beginning of the organized day. Lunch answers the interruption inside labor. Dinner will later answer the return from labor into household and social life. Beneath all three, the body remains older than the names. It carries hunger from a world where food came unevenly, and it lives now in a world where time often decides when hunger is allowed to be answered. Lunch, then, is not proof that humans evolved for 3 fixed meals. It is proof that human societies learned to place food inside work, and that the body was flexible enough to follow. Lunch shows how easily the body can become trained by the shape of a society. A pause repeated for many years can begin to feel like a natural doorway in the day. The body works through the morning, the mind grows tired, the stomach begins to speak, and food seems to belong exactly there, in the middle. Yet when we follow the question back toward human origins, that middle point becomes less certain. The body always needed energy, but the day was not always divided by work bells, school schedules, factory shifts, office hours, or shared public routines. Before those systems, the middle of the day could mean many things. It could be a time to rest from heat, to keep moving before darkness, to return toward camp, to follow a path, to search near water, to prepare something already found, or simply to wait because food had not yet appeared. The sun could stand high in the sky, but the sun did not announce lunch. The meal depended on what the world allowed. This is the careful difference at the center of the story. Midday hunger can be real without lunch being ancient. A person can feel tired after effort without the body having evolved for one named meal at a fixed hour. Work makes hunger more visible because work spends energy. Organized work makes lunch more visible because organized work needs a pause. The older body could continue through intervals, but societies learned to use those intervals. They placed food between labor and more labor. They used the pause to restore strength, gather people, mark time, and keep the larger machine of daily life moving. In a field, a workshop, a school, a military camp, or a factory, lunch could become a practical answer to a practical problem. How to keep many bodies working under one rhythm. That rhythm might be useful, but it was not the same as a biological command written at the beginning of the species. This is why lunch belongs more to the history of labor than to the deep origin of hunger. It is a social bridge, built between the body's need and the demands placed upon that body. The bridge can be kind when it gives rest. It can be strict when it tells people that hunger must wait until the allowed time. It can be unequal when one person's pause is comfortable while another person's pause is brief, poor, or controlled. Across history, the midday meal would have changed with class, work, season, and place. A wealthy person could eat with more freedom. A laborer might eat when the task allowed. A traveller might eat what could be carried. A soldier might eat according to ration. A child in school might eat when the institution opened the time. These differences remind us that there was no single natural lunch shared by all humans. There was only the ancient need for energy, shaped again and again by the world outside the body. In modern life, lunch can feel almost invisible because it is built into the day before the day begins. People plan around it. Workplaces expect it. Shops sell toward it. Families pack it. Schools schedule it. The body learns all of this. It begins to expect food when the clock approaches the familiar hour, but that expectation is evidence of adaptation, not evidence of origin. The human body can learn the rhythm of lunch because it once learned other rhythms: the season of a plant, the return of a group, the smell of cooking, the sight of food being prepared, the slowing of movement near shelter, the memory of a place where nourishment had once been found. Lunch is one modern language spoken to an older body. It may be useful, comforting, and necessary in many lives, but it is still a language learned from society. So when we ask why humans did not evolve to eat 3 meals a day, lunch gives a clear answer. The body evolved for energy, effort, waiting, and response. Lunch evolved from labor, coordination, and time. Between those two histories lies the quiet truth of the modern meal. It feels natural because the body is flexible enough to make repeated human arrangements feel like nature. Industrial time did something unusual to hunger. It did not invent the need for food, because that need was already ancient. It did not invent the body's ability to wait, because the body had carried that ability through far older landscapes. What it changed was the authority of the clock. As villages became towns, towns became cities, and labor moved into more organized systems, the day began to be measured less by the changing tasks of a household or field, and more by shared hours. Work could begin at a set time, school could begin at a set time, markets could open and close at set times. Trains, shifts, factories, offices, and public schedules made time feel less like a natural flow and more like a grid laid over human life. Inside that grid, eating also had to find its place. Hunger was no longer only a signal from the body or a response to food that had become available. It became something that had to fit between bells, shifts, lessons, wages, travel, and the repeated demands of organized society. This is where the 3-meal day begins to look much more modern than ancient. Breakfast becomes the meal before the day's scheduled labor. Lunch becomes the pause inside that labor. Dinner becomes the return from labor into household, rest, and social life. The pattern can feel deeply natural because it repeats so often, but its shape comes from the structure around the body. A person may eat in the morning not only because hunger has arrived, but because work will soon begin. A person may eat at midday not only because the body needs energy, but because the institution allows a break. A person may eat in the evening not only because the body has waited, but because family members return from separate schedules and gather again. The clock does not replace hunger, it surrounds hunger. It tells hunger where it is allowed to go. This is very different from the older world we began with, where food organized time more than time organized food. In that older world, people might eat when something was found, prepared, shared, or safe to consume. In the industrial and modern world, food often has to appear because the hour has arrived. A worker may have only a short time to eat. A child may eat when school says it is time. A commuter may eat before leaving because the next chance is uncertain. A family may eat dinner when the workday releases its members. In these moments, the body is still real, still hungry, still tired, still in need of energy. But the answer to that need is increasingly arranged by external time. The body adapts, as it always has. It begins to expect food at repeated hours. It learns the morning rush, the noon pause, the evening return. Appetite gathers around the schedule. The stomach seems to know the clock. Yet what the body is really showing is not that humans evolved for 3 meals from the beginning, but that human biology can be trained by repeated conditions. This training can be helpful. Predictable meals can make daily life easier. They can help families coordinate, help children be cared for, help workers plan, and help societies move millions of people through shared routines. The question is not whether such routines can be useful. The question is whether they are ancient biological laws. Industrial time suggests they are not. It shows us that the modern meal pattern depends on a world full of clocks, employers, schools, transport, stored food, artificial light, and repeated public schedules. These are not minor details around eating. They are the scaffolding that makes eating at the same times possible for large numbers of people. Without that scaffolding, the 3-meal day loses much of its apparent inevitability. The human body remains older than this structure. It carries hunger from a time before factory bells, before classrooms, before offices, before timed breaks, and before the modern kitchen could answer appetite almost immediately. The industrial world did not create a new body. It placed the old body inside a stricter rhythm, and once that rhythm repeated long enough, it began to feel like nature, even though it was history speaking through the clock. The clock made eating look cleaner than hunger really is. A clock can divide the day into equal units, but the body does not live in equal units. It rises slowly from sleep, spends energy unevenly, reacts to stress, habit, memory, movement, temperature, and emotion. It may feel strong in 1 hour and tired in another. It may feel hungry because energy is low, or because food is near, or because the same hour has meant food for many years. Industrial time did not remove this complexity. It covered it with order. Once labor became tied to shared schedules, the body's older signals had to pass through a new system of permission. There was a time to begin work, a time to pause, a time to return, and often a time when eating was expected. This was not the same as the ancient rhythm of food appearing through landscape and opportunity. It was a rhythm built by institutions. A factory could not be shaped around each worker's private hunger. A school could not open every child's meal at a different moment. A train schedule could not wait for appetite. An office, a workshop, a market, or a military routine needed many bodies to move together. So eating became attached to the shared machinery of the day. Breakfast prepared the body before departure. Lunch interrupted labor at an approved point. Dinner gathered people after the scheduled world released them. This pattern could become useful, even comforting, because it gave the day a familiar shape. But the shape came from social coordination, not from a deep biological command. The ancient body was being trained to obey a modern map of time. This training could be gentle, but it could also be strict. A person might feel hungry before the allowed break and still keep working. Another might not feel hungry in the morning but eat because the next chance would not come soon. A child might eat because the school timetable opened a small window. A worker might hurry through food because the bell would call everyone back. In these cases, the clock did not simply help the body, it negotiated with the body. It told hunger when it could be answered, and it told fullness when the day had to continue. Over time, repeated schedules became internal expectations. The body began to prepare for food at the same hours. Appetite gathered around routine. The absence of food at the expected time could feel uncomfortable, not only because energy was low, but because the learned rhythm had been interrupted. This is how culture can become bodily. What begins outside the body can slowly be felt inside it. That does not make the pattern false. It makes it historical. The 3-meal day is powerful because it has been repeated by families, schools, employers, markets, media, and public life. It is reinforced by the way food is sold, packed, advertised, cooked, and discussed. Morning foods are separated from midday foods. Dinner foods are given their own meaning. The day becomes edible in 3 named places. Yet beneath those names, the body remains capable of more than one rhythm. It still carries the older ability to manage intervals, respond to availability, learn expectation, and adjust to circumstance. This is why the modern meal schedule can feel natural without being ancient. It feels natural because the body is adaptive. It is not ancient because the social conditions that hold it in place are recent compared with the long history of human survival. Industrial time did not create hunger, it organized hunger. It placed an old need inside a world of bells, shifts, timetables, commutes, classrooms, and coordinated labor. The human body followed because following patterns is one of the things human bodies do well. But when we look beneath the clock, we can still see the older truth. Humans first learned to eat through changing landscapes, not fixed schedules. And only much later did society teach the body to expect food at the same 3 doors in the day. The modern 3-meal day became powerful because it solved a social problem more than an evolutionary one. Large societies need coordination. They need workers to arrive at similar hours, children to enter schools together, markets to open predictably, transport to move on time, and households to organize care around repeated routines. Once the day is built this way, eating also becomes scheduled. Food has to be curtailed where the system can hold it. Breakfast becomes the preparation before separation. Lunch becomes the permitted pause inside work. Dinner becomes the return, when scattered people come back into a household or social circle. This pattern can feel warm, familiar, and practical, but it is still a pattern built around modern time. The body did not create the clock. The clock created a frame around the body. Inside that frame, hunger learned new habits. A person might not wake with strong hunger, but still eat because the workday is about to begin. A person might become hungry near noon because years of repeated breaks have taught the body to expect food there. A person might feel dinner as the proper end of the day, not only because the body needs energy, but because the evening meal carries memory, family, rest, and closure. These feelings are real. They should not be dismissed. But real feelings can be historically trained. The body is not lying when it expects food at familiar times. It is doing what adaptable bodies do. It is learning the world it lives in. The important question is what kind of world taught it. For most of human history, the teacher was not the industrial clock. It was landscape, season, light, temperature, movement, danger, abundance, scarcity, and the presence or absence of food itself. Later, farming taught the body different lessons: harvest, storage, labor, waiting, ownership, and seasonal planning. Civilization added another layer: tax, ration, rank, kitchen, market, ritual, and authority. Industrial time added one more powerful layer, the shared schedule. It did not erase the older layers. It covered them with a rhythm so repeated that it began to feel like the body's own voice. This is why the 3-meal day can be both useful and misleading. It is useful because it helps modern life run. It gives children a stable beginning, workers a pause, families a gathering point, and society a way to organize food around time. It is misleading when we forget that this order is historical. The human body is capable of living inside it, but capability is not the same as original design. A person can learn to sleep under electric light, work under artificial schedules, sit for long hours, eat from a refrigerator, and respond to phone alarms. None of that means these conditions shape the deepest beginnings of the body. They are environments the body learns after the fact. The 3-meal pattern belongs to that kind of environment. It is a modern arrangement placed over an ancient hunger. This does not make the arrangement bad. It simply means we should not mistake repetition for nature. When something happens every day, it begins to feel inevitable. When millions of people do it, it begins to feel universal. When institutions are built around it, it begins to feel correct. But the older story of humanity is not a story of universal breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It is a story of bodies meeting food through changing worlds, then slowly being surrounded by systems that made food more predictable, more controlled, and more scheduled. Industrial time is one of the final steps in that long movement. It turned eating into part of the public order of the day. It gave hunger-approved locations on the clock, and because the body is flexible, it learned those locations well. By the end of this step, the answer to the title is clearer. Humans did not evolve to eat 3 meals a day because 3 meals a day required a world that arrived much later than the human body. The schedule is young. Slacks, the hunger is old, and beneath every clock-made meal, there remains a body whose deeper memory was shaped before time itself was divided into breakfast, lunch, and dinner. A modern person can feel confused by hunger because modern life gives the body more signals than it was ever meant to separate cleanly. There is biological hunger, the body's real need for energy. There is habitual hunger, learned through repeated meal times. There is social hunger, rising because others are eating nearby. There is emotional hunger, stirred by stress, loneliness, boredom, comfort, memory, or fatigue. There is visual hunger, awakened by food that is seen even when the body was not searching for it. There is clock hunger, appearing because the hour has become familiar. All of these can feel similar inside the body. They can overlap quietly, without announcing where they came from. This is one reason modern eating can feel so strange. The body is ancient, but the environment around it has become crowded with food cues. A person can wake without strong need and still meet a kitchen, a phone screen, a shop window, a routine, or a message that says morning should contain food. A person can pass through the middle of the day and feel hunger rise because noon has arrived, even if the feeling is partly trained by years of stopping at that hour. A person can finish the evening meal and still feel drawn toward more food because food remains visible, available, and emotionally meaningful. In the older human world, food was often difficult enough to find that the sight, smell, and presence of it were important signals. When food appeared, attention was supposed to turn toward it. That response was useful. It helped the body notice opportunity. But in modern life, opportunity does not appear only sometimes. It can appear almost constantly. Food can sit in cabinets, refrigerators, shops, advertisements, celebrations, workplaces, and screens. The body's old ability to notice food is now living inside a world where food is designed to be noticed. That can make hunger feel less like a simple message and more like a crowded conversation. This does not mean the body is broken. It means the body is responsive, perhaps more responsive than modern life admits. A body that once needed to learn the timing of seasons can learn the timing of lunch. A body that once noticed the smell of cooking from a shared fire can notice the smell of food in a street or kitchen. A body that once responded strongly when energy-rich food appeared can still respond strongly when food is easy to reach. The problem is not that the body has no wisdom. The problem is that the world speaking to it has changed. For most of human history, the body had to bridge the distance between wanting and finding. Today, for many people, the distance between wanting and eating can be very short. That short distance changes the meaning of appetite. Hunger no longer has to wait for the land, the season, the hunt, the harvest, the storehouse, or the work pause in quite the same way. It can be answered quickly, sometimes before the body has had time to understand what it is asking for. This is where the 3-meal schedule can add another layer of confusion. It can make eating feel orderly, but it can also make people treat time as if it were the same as need. If the clock says breakfast, the body may be expected to eat. If the clock says lunch, hunger may be assumed. If the clock says dinner, the day may feel incomplete without a full meal. These routines can be useful, and for many lives they provide stability. But they also show how modern people often live between two systems: the old biological system of flexible hunger and the newer social system of scheduled eating. When those systems line up, eating feels simple. When they do not, the body can feel uncertain. Am I hungry because I need food? Because I always eat now? Because I am tired? Because I saw food? Because others are eating? Or because this is how the day is supposed to move? The answer is not always clear, and that uncertainty is part of being an ancient body inside a modern food world. Humans did not evolve for 3 fixed meals, because the body first learned to respond to changing conditions. But now the conditions are no longer only weather, landscape, and season. They are also clocks, habits, stress, abundance, and endless signals telling the body that food is near. One of the most difficult things about modern hunger is that it can arrive with many different voices. Sometimes it is the deep, steady signal of a body that needs energy. Sometimes it is the echo of a habit repeated for years. Sometimes it is the memory of comfort. Sometimes it is the tiredness of a mind that has been working too long. Sometimes it is a response to stress, or to the sight of food, or to the simple fact that a familiar hour has arrived. Inside the body, these signals do not always come with clear labels. They can feel like one thing, even when they come from many places. This makes the modern food world very different from the older world that shaped human flexibility. In the older world, hunger often had to travel through delay. Wanting food did not mean food was immediately present. The body could send a signal, but the answer still depended on land, group knowledge, season, tools, weather, safety, and luck. That distance between signal and answer gave hunger a different shape. It had to live beside waiting. It had to live beside effort. It had to live beside uncertainty. In modern life, especially where food is stable and easy to reach, the distance can become much shorter. A person can feel a small pull toward food and answer it almost at once. A cabinet can open. A refrigerator can open. A shop can be entered. A delivery can arrive. Food may be near, even when the body has not searched, moved, gathered, or worked directly for it. This is a remarkable human achievement, but it also means the body is surrounded by more answers than questions. The old system that noticed food as opportunity now lives in a world where opportunity has been multiplied. This can make scheduled eating feel even more confusing. 3 meals give the day a structure, but they also teach the body to expect food whether the older biological signal is strong or not. If breakfast has always followed waking, the absence of breakfast may feel strange even on a morning when the body is not clearly hungry. If lunch has always followed work, the body may begin preparing for food because the work pause is near. If dinner has always marked the end of the day, appetite may rise with evening habits, family movement, kitchen sounds, and the feeling of closure. None of this is imaginary. Learned hunger can be felt strongly. The body is not pretending, it is responding to patterns. But those patterns are not the same as deep evolutionary necessity. They are the ways modern life has trained an ancient system to expect food at socially meaningful times. This is why people can feel pulled between comfort and confusion. A meal can be calming because it gives order to the day. It can also feel automatic, as if the person is following a script written by the clock rather than by the body. The same meal can be both useful and learned. The same hunger can be partly biological and partly habitual. The same appetite can carry energy need, memory, stress, boredom, social belonging, and routine all at once. The body was not designed to separate these signals perfectly, because for much of human history it did not need to live inside such a dense food environment. Food was meaningful because it was valuable, not because it was constantly advertised, stored, displayed, and placed into every corner of daily life. The older body still does what it knows how to do. It notices, prepares, desires, remembers, and adapts. But now it does so inside a world where food is not only nourishment, it is schedule, reward, habit, comfort, celebration, distraction, identity, and business. That is why the question of 3 meals is not only about the number 3. It is about the larger mismatch between an ancient, flexible body and a modern environment that speaks to hunger all day long. Humans did not evolve to eat 3 meals a day because human hunger began as a response to changing conditions, not as obedience to a timetable. But modern conditions have become so repetitive and so full of cues that the timetable can feel like biology. Beneath that feeling, the older body remains patient and responsive, still trying to understand whether food is truly needed, simply expected, or only present because the modern world has placed it within reach. Modern hunger can feel confusing because the body is now asked to listen to too many signals at once. The old signal was not simple, but it was usually closer to survival. It rose inside a world where food required effort, attention, patience, and contact with the environment. Today, the signal rises inside a world where food can be planned, displayed, stored, delivered, advertised, remembered, and offered before the body has clearly asked. This does not mean modern life is wrong. It means the body is living in a louder environment than the one that shaped its deepest flexibility. A person may feel hungry because energy is needed. A person may also feel hungry because noon has arrived, because a certain smell appears, because stress has built up quietly, because sleep was poor, because others are eating, because the evening routine has begun, or because food has become a way to mark comfort after a difficult day. These causes can mix together so gently that they become almost impossible to separate. The body does not always say, "This is need, this is habit, this is memory, this is emotion." It often speaks in one broad feeling, and the modern world quickly answers that feeling with food. This is why the 3-meal day can feel natural even when it is historical. It gives hunger a map. Morning has a place. Midday has a place. Evening has a place. The map can be useful, especially in a life filled with work, family, school, travel, medicine, and care. But a map is not the same as the landscape that existed before it. Beneath the map, the older body still carries a wider range. It can learn repeated meals, but it can also live through intervals. It can prepare for a familiar hour, but it can also respond to changing conditions. It can feel strong expectation without that expectation proving an ancient rule. The body's confusion begins when a learned schedule is mistaken for the only true voice of biology. Then a person may wonder why hunger appears when food is not needed, or why hunger is absent when the clock says it should be there, or why eating at the proper hour does not always feel connected to real satisfaction. The answer is not that the body is broken. The answer is that the body is adaptive. An adaptation can make culture feel internal. For most of human history, hunger was shaped by the delay between need and access. In modern life, hunger is often shaped by the closeness between cue and response. The old body learned to notice opportunity because opportunity mattered. Now opportunity may appear constantly. Food can be within reach while the body is resting, working, grieving, celebrating, watching, waiting, or trying to sleep. The ancient attention given to food has not disappeared. It has been placed in a world where food signals are far more frequent than food scarcity is for many people. That creates a quiet tension. The body still knows how to respond to availability, but availability is no longer rare in the same way. The body still knows how to learn routine, but routine can become so strong that it hides the difference between hunger and expectation. The body still knows how to seek comfort, but comfort can become tied to eating even when the deeper need may be rest, calm, company, or time. This is why the question of 3 meals reaches beyond meals. It asks how much of modern hunger comes from the body and how much comes from the world that surrounds the body. There is no single answer for every person, and this story should not become advice about when to eat or not eat. The safer lesson is historical. Humans did not evolve inside a fixed 3-meal system. They evolved with flexible hunger, changing access, social sharing, and the ability to continue when food did not arrive on command. Modern life placed that older hunger into a tight schedule and then surrounded it with constant cues. So when the body feels uncertain, it may be remembering more than one world at the same time, the ancient world where food was opportunity, and the modern world where food has become time, habit, comfort, and expectation. The lesson of an older hunger is not that modern people should abandon the world they live in. It is not a command to eat less, eat more, skip meals, or imitate an imagined past. That would be too simple, and it would turn history into advice it cannot honestly give. The past was not one clean model. It was varied, difficult, local, and often uncertain. Some human groups may have eaten often when food was available. Others may have lived with longer gaps. Some seasons may have felt generous. Others may have narrowed choice. Some people in later societies may have had regular food, while others waited, worked, served, or stretched what little they had. The older hunger was not a diet plan. It was a condition of being alive in a changing world. What it can offer us is not a rule, but perspective. It reminds us that the human body is older than the meal schedule surrounding it. Before breakfast, lunch, and dinner became familiar names, the body had already learned to live with need, delay, memory, sharing, effort, storage, habit, and uncertainty. It had learned to treat food as something deeply valuable, because food was never merely a product on a shelf. It was landscape, season, labor, fire, risk, cooperation, and time. When we see this, the 3-meal day becomes less like a law of nature and more like a late human arrangement, useful in many lives, but not the root of human hunger itself. This makes the title question quieter and more honest. Humans did not evolve to eat 3 meals a day because 3 meals a day required a world that came much later. Settled homes, stored food, farming, social ranks, work routines, schools, factories, markets, clocks, transport, and kitchens that could answer hunger quickly. The body came first, the schedule came later. Yet the schedule became powerful because the body is flexible enough to learn it. This flexibility is one of the most important threads in the whole story. It allowed humans to live with wild foods and cooked foods, with farming and storage, with feast and shortage, with labor and rest, with social sharing and social inequality. It also allows modern people to feel hungry at familiar hours, to find comfort in repeated meals, and to organize the day around food without noticing how much history stands behind that order. The body can make culture feel natural. That is both beautiful and misleading. Beautiful, because it shows how deeply humans can adapt to the worlds they create. Misleading, because after enough repetition, a recent pattern can seem timeless. A person may feel that breakfast must begin the day, that lunch must divide work, and that dinner must close the evening. For many people, those rhythms are practical, meaningful, and safe. But they are not the only possible human rhythm, and they are not the first one. Beneath them is an older body whose signals are broader than the clock. That body can feel hunger from need, from habit, from emotion, from smell, from memory, from social life, and from expectation. It does not always separate these messages perfectly, because it was never formed inside a world where food signals were so constant and so carefully arranged. To understand this is not to reject modern meals, it is to hold them more gently. The 3-meal day is a human solution, not an eternal command. It belongs to civilization, labor, family, and timekeeping. It has helped many people create order in ordinary life, but the body sitting at the table carries a deeper memory than the table itself. It remembers in its own silent way a longer history in which food arrived through opportunity and hunger had to wait for the world to answer. And perhaps the most useful lesson is simply this. When we ask why humans did not evolve to eat 3 meals a day, we are really asking how an ancient body learned to live inside a modern day, and how much of what feels natural is actually history repeated until it becomes almost invisible. The modern meal schedule is easy to misunderstand because it feels calm on the surface. 3 points in the day: morning, middle, evening. A beginning, a pause, a return. It gives the day a shape that many people recognize immediately. But beneath that shape is a long human story that was never so evenly arranged. The body did not begin with named meals. It began with the need to stay alive inside, changing surroundings. It learned to notice food, remember places, share with others, use stored energy, endure delay, and respond when the world changed. These are older lessons than breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They belong to the deep background of human life, before clocks could divide the day, and before institutions could decide when eating should happen. This is why the 3-meal day should be understood as a layer placed over the body, not as the foundation of the body itself. A layer can be useful. It can protect people from disorder. It can help families care for children, help workers plan their strength, help elders receive food regularly, help schools and communities move through a shared day. There is real value in rhythm. Human beings are social animals, and shared time can make life easier. But useful rhythm is not the same as ancient design. The body's deeper history is not a history of perfect regularity. It is a history of adaptation. Food might have appeared early, late, often, rarely, abundantly, or with difficulty. Later, farming made food more planned, but still tied it to harvest, storage, labor, weather, and social control. Civilization made eating more organized, but also more unequal. Industrial time made eating more scheduled, but only because modern systems needed many bodies to move together. Through all these changes, the body remained the older witness. It kept learning. It learned the field, then the storehouse, then the kitchen, then the clock. It learned morning hunger because morning meals were repeated. It learned lunch because work paused. It learned dinner because the evening became a social return. The body's ability to learn can make these moments feel natural, but their natural feeling comes from repetition, not from proof that they were always there. This distinction is important because it prevents the story from becoming too simple. It would be wrong to say that 3 meals are unnatural in a way that makes them bad. It would also be wrong to say that 3 meals are natural in a way that makes them timeless. A more honest view sits between those extremes. The 3-meal day is a cultural pattern that many bodies can live with, because human bodies are flexible. It is neither a perfect law nor a mistake. It is one arrangement among many possible arrangements, shaped by history, work, family, technology, and access to food. The older hunger beneath it is not asking us to return to the past. The past cannot be copied, and much of it would not be desirable. The older hunger is asking us to notice the difference between need and routine, between body and clock, between what humans can adapt to and what humans were first shaped by. That difference gives the listener a quieter understanding of the self. When hunger appears, it may carry biology, but it may also carry memory, habit, fatigue, comfort, social expectation, or the learned rhythm of a lifetime. When a meal arrives, it may answer the body, but it may also answer the schedule. Human life is often made from both. The body is not separate from history. It has been trained by every world it has passed through, and so the question is not whether 3 meals are right or wrong for every person. The deeper question is how a body formed in uncertainty came to feel at home inside a clock-made day, and what that tells us about the quiet power of human adaptation. The quiet lesson of this long human story is not that the modern table is wrong. The table is one of humanity's great comforts. It represents shelter, memory, care, stored food, shared labor, and the hope that hunger can be answered without fear. To sit before food at a familiar hour is not a small thing. For many people, it is safety. It means the season did not fail, the road remained open, the household has enough, the workday allows a pause, and someone, somewhere, helped bring food within reach. The mistake is not in having meals. The mistake is in forgetting how young the shape of those meals really is. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner can feel as if they rise from the body itself, but they also rise from fields, markets, kitchens, clocks, schools, wages, families, and the enormous hidden systems that make food appear when the day expects it. Beneath those systems is a body much older than the schedule. It is a body descended from lives that met food through changing landscapes, not fixed hours. It is a body shaped by need, waiting, movement, memory, cooperation, and the ability to continue when the world had not yet answered. This older body did not evolve around 3 named meals, because those names belong to a later world. It evolved around energy, uncertainty, social sharing, and adaptation. That is the central truth we can carry without turning it into a rule. The past does not tell every modern person how to eat. It cannot be copied honestly. Ancient lives were too varied, too local, too difficult, and too incompletely known. But the past can give us a wider frame. It can show that what feels normal today may be normal because society repeated it, not because evolution began there. It can remind us that the body is not a simple clock, and hunger is not always a single clean message. Hunger may be need, it may be habit, it may be memory, it may be stress, it may be comfort. It may be the body responding to a world where food is always near, always named, always timed, always waiting. The human body is not foolish for responding to that world. It is doing what it has always done. It is learning the conditions around it. Long ago, it learned the season, the track, the tide, the fire, the storehouse, and the shared return with food. Today, it learns alarms, lunch breaks, refrigerators, screens, advertisements, and the evening routine. The same flexibility that helped humans survive older uncertainty now helps humans live inside modern order. This is why the answer to the title should remain careful. Humans did not evolve to eat 3 meals a day, not because 3 meals are useless, and not because the body rejects them, but because the body's deeper history is wider than any one schedule. 3 meals are a cultural rhythm placed over an ancient need. They are a way societies organize hunger, labor, family, and time. They can be practical, they can be meaningful, they can be comforting, but they are not the beginning of hunger. The beginning is older, a living body in a changing world, needing energy, watching for opportunity, depending on others, and carrying itself through the space between wanting and receiving. Perhaps this is the real educational value of the story. It teaches humility. It asks us to look at ordinary life and see history inside it. A plate of food is not only a plate of food. It is agriculture, fire, storage, transport, labor, habit, memory, and the long human effort to make uncertainty more bearable. A mealtime is not only a biological moment, it is also a social agreement, and the body sitting quietly at that meal is not only modern, it is carrying traces of a much older world. So as the day closes and the familiar rhythm of eating fades into the background, one question remains open and unanswered. If so much of what feels natural is history repeated until it becomes invisible, what else inside the human body is older than the life we now ask it to live?